Hello guys, welcome to Fiction Quest. So in this video, we will see what if Naruto was the betrothed of Sona Sitri and got Harem in student council. If you enjoy these kinds of stories, don't forget to show us some love by hitting the like button and subscribing to the channel. Your support means the world to us. Now, let's start the story. Chapter 1, The Contract and the Queen. The quiet click of a wooden piece against the board was the only sound that dared disturb the opulent silence of the study. Lord Sitri, a man whose tailored suit seemed woven from shadows and ambition, steepled his fingers, his silver eyes fixed on the shogi board between them. The game, like everything in his life, was a measure of control, a dance of calculated sacrifice and strategic dominance. For the last hour, he had been systematically dismantling his opponent's defenses, cornering the king with the cold, patient precision that had elevated his family to one of the great devil houses. His opponent, however, seemed utterly unconcerned. Naruto Uzumaki leaned back in his plush armchair, the picture of relaxed indifference. He wore simple black trousers and a plain gray shirt that did little to conceal the formidable build of a man who had treated mountains as training grounds. A faint, almost imperceptible tracery of scars marked the sun-kissed skin of his forearms, the only overt sign that his past held more than lazy afternoons. His hair, a brilliant shock of sun-bleached gold, was untamed, and his blue eyes, as clear and deep as a summer sky, held a placid warmth that was utterly at odds with the predatory world he now inhabited. He had made only a handful of moves, most of which seemed random, almost foolish. He'd sacrificed his rooks and bishops for seemingly no gain, leaving his king dangerously exposed. Lord Sitri felt a flicker of disappointment. He had hoped for a challenge, a glimpse into the mind of the anomaly sitting across from him. Instead, he was being met with what felt like apathy. "Your strategy is unorthodox, Uzumaki-san," Lord Sitri stated, his voice a smooth baritone that had swayed councils and sealed pacts. He moved his gold general, a definitive, closing maneuver. Check. Naruto's eyes drifted from the window, where the crimson sky of the underworld bled into a bruised purple, and focused on the board. He offered a small, easy smile. "I was never very good at thinking too far ahead." He reached out, his fingers hovering over his last remaining pawn, a piece that had advanced, unnoticed, across the board. "I just focus on what's right in front of me." He slid the pawn forward into the final rank. Promote. The simple piece was flipped, its new designation as a gold general gleaming in the soft magical light. It now stood directly beside Lord Sitri's king, supported by a single, overlooked lancer. Lord Sitri's expression did not change, but his silver eyes widened a fraction of an inch. He re-examined the board, his mind, which could process 1,000 tactical variables in a second, working furiously. The random sacrifices, the abandoned defenses, they weren't random at all. They had been a grand distraction, a sleight of hand to draw his attention away from the inexorable advance of a single, insignificant foot soldier. Every move had been a feint to protect that one piece. "Checkmate," Naruto said, his voice holding no triumph, only a quiet finality. A slow, genuine smile spread across Lord Sitri's face. He leaned back, the tension leaving his shoulders. "Magnificent," he breathed. "Utterly magnificent. A brute force strategy disguised as idiocy. You lured my entire army to one side of the battlefield while your true weapon marched, unopposed, straight to my throne." "It gets the job done," Naruto replied with a shrug. "Indeed." Lord Sitri's smile faded, replaced by that same calculating intensity. "It is precisely that quality, that deceptive, overwhelming directness, that makes our current arrangement so vital. It's been 3 months since my scouts found you, and I confess, I am no closer to understanding the full scope of your power." The memory was still as sharp as a shard of glass in his mind. The report had been panicked, nonsensical. A meteor strike in a remote, mountainous region of Sitri territory. But the crater wasn't a crater. It was too clean, too perfect, as if a giant, invisible fist had punched the earth. And in the center of it lay Naruto. When the high-class devil squad had approached, they hadn't been met with an attack. They had been met with a presence. An aura of such dense, suffocating life force that it felt like trying to breathe underwater. It wasn't demonic, nor was it holy, a fact that had baffled his researchers for weeks. It was something else. Something primordial. It was the raw, untamed energy of a world, concentrated in a single being. The devils, bred in a world of negative energy, found it physically painful to be near. They had collapsed, one by one, their own magical energy flickering like candles in a hurricane, until they all lay unconscious on the crater's edge. Only then had the pressure receded, leaving Naruto asleep in the dirt, his body battered and his strange orange jacket torn to shreds. "You were an enigma then, and you are an enigma now," Lord Sitri continued, his gaze unwavering. An untethered force of unimaginable magnitude, dropped into a world governed by strict hierarchy and ancient laws. A king without a board. In the hands of the Baal or the Gremmery, you would be a weapon. In the hands of the old Satan faction, a catastrophe. Here, he gestured around the luxurious study, you can be an ally. A partner. And a son-in-law, Naruto finished, his tone neutral. He already knew where this was going. They had had this conversation before, in pieces, but this was the final move of their real game. And a son-in-law, Lord Sitri confirmed. My daughter, Sona, is the heir to the Sitri clan. She is brilliant, a master strategist, and will one day hold a seat on the council. Her power is immense, her control over water magic is second to none in her generation. But she lacks a decisive, overwhelming force. The kind of power that ends debates before they begin. The kind of power that makes rivals think twice, and enemies not think at all. He leaned forward, his voice dropping. You possess that power. A betrothal between you and Sona would not be a mere union. It would be a statement. It would fuse your absolute, unaccountable strength with the legitimate authority and strategic prowess of the Sitri clan. It would elevate our house, secure our future, and, most importantly, give you a legitimate place in this world. A banner to stand under. A family to protect. There it was. Not a request, but a political theorem. A logical conclusion. There was no mention of love, no pretense of affection. It was a contract, as clean and binding as any signed in blood. What does Sona think of this logical conclusion? Naruto asked, his eyes flicking towards the ornate door. As if on cue, the door opened. Sona Sitri entered, her posture as straight and unyielding as a pillar of ice. She wore the pristine white uniform of Koa Academy's student council president, a position she held with the same seriousness as her role as a devil heiress. Her short black hair was cut in a severe, practical bob, and her violet eyes, framed by sharp, intelligent features and a pair of slim glasses, held the cool, detached air of a scholar examining a specimen. She carried a tablet computer, her ever-present tool of order and control. I find the arrangement to be strategically sound, Father, Sona said, her voice crisp and devoid of emotion. She came to a stop beside her father's chair, her gaze sweeping over Naruto, cataloging him, assessing him. There was no warmth, no welcome. It was the look a general gave a new, powerful, and dangerously unpredictable siege engine. Uzumaki-san's abilities, while unquantifiable, represent a paradigm shift in the balance of power. Aligning them with our house is the most logical course of action to ensure our security and influence. Naruto watched her, truly watched her. He saw the slight, almost imperceptible tension in her jaw. He saw the way her fingers gripped the edge of her tablet just a little too tightly. She was agreeing with the logic, but her soul was screaming in protest. Like him, she was a leader. And leaders do not appreciate having their paths chosen for them. He recognized the look in her eyes, it was the same look he'd seen on Gaara's face long ago, the look of someone trapped by duty. He gave her a small nod of understanding, a silent acknowledgement of her sacrifice. Her eyes widened slightly, surprised by his perception. Naruto turned back to Lord Sitri. He thought of the crater, of waking up in a world that wasn't his, the comforting presence of Kurama in his mind the only familiar anchor. He had saved his world, achieved the peace he had bled for, and in the aftermath, a stray dimensional tear from Kagaya's final, desperate attack had ripped him away. He had nothing here. No friends, no home. The Sitri were offering him a foundation. They weren't asking him to be a slave or a weapon. They were offering him a partnership, a family, albeit one forged in politics. And they were honest about it. He respected that more than any honeyed words. It's a logical arrangement, Naruto agreed, echoing her father's words. He looked directly at Sona. I accept. For a single, fleeting moment, the mask of control on Sona's face slipped. A flicker of something, surprise, annoyance, fear, crossed her features before it was ruthlessly suppressed. She pushed her glasses up her nose, a gesture that was both a nervous tic and a reassertion of her composure. Excellent, Lord Sitri declared, clapping his hands together softly. Then it is settled. Sona, you will officially introduce Naruto to the student council tomorrow. He will be enrolling at Koa Academy and joining you as a vice president. It is imperative that your peerage understands the importance of this alliance and extends him the proper respect. Of course, father, Sona replied, her voice once again a perfect monotone. She gave Naruto a curt, formal bow. Uzumaki-san. I will expect you in the student council room at 0800 hours. Punctuality is mandatory. Without another word, she turned and exited the study, the click of her heels on the marble floor echoing like the ticking of a clock. Naruto watched her go, a wry smile touching his lips. Kurama's deep, rumbling voice echoed in his mind. She's a feisty one, Kit. All ice and sharp edges. Reminds me of that Uchiha of yours, but with better manners. She's just putting up walls, Naruto thought back, his mental voice calm. She's a leader who's just had control taken from her. She's allowed to be angry. Humph. Just don't expect this to be easy. These devils are all schemers and politicians. You're a hammer, Naruto. They're going to try and use you to nail down their ambitions. I know, Naruto replied, his gaze drifting back to the shogi board. But a hammer can also be used to build something new. The student council room at Koa Academy was a monument to Sona Sitri's personality. It was spacious, immaculately clean, and organized with almost terrifying efficiency. Bookshelves were perfectly aligned, files were color-coded and labeled with printed text, and not a single pen was out of place on the massive central table. The air itself felt structured, as if even the dust motes were required to move in orderly patterns. Naruto stood in the doorway, his hands shoved casually in the pockets of the standard-issue male uniform. It felt strange, constricting. A poor substitute for the comfortable gear he was used to. Inside, 5 young women stood at attention, forming a neat line beside the head of the table. At its head stood Sona, her expression as severe as it had been the night before. You are 2 minutes early, Uzumaki-san, she stated, glancing at the digital clock on the wall. Acceptable. Naruto just shrugged and walked into the room, his relaxed gait a stark contrast to their rigid postures. The 5 girls watched him, their expressions a mixture of curiosity, apprehension, and, in one case, outright suspicion. As I informed you all yesterday, Sona began, her voice projecting across the silent room, this is Naruto Uzumaki. By decree of my father, Lord Sitri, he and I are officially betrothed. He will be joining the student council as a co-vice president, effective immediately. You will afford him the same respect and operational support you afford me. Her words landed with the weight of stones. Betrothed. The word hung in the air, charged with 1,000 implications. Allow me to introduce my peerage, Sona continued, gesturing to the girl standing closest to her. The girl was tall and beautiful, with long black hair tied in a flowing ponytail and a figure that the uniform did little to hide. She wore a serene, almost detached smile, but her eyes, a sharp, intelligent brown, were cold and analytical. This was Tsubaki Shinra, Sona's queen. She gave Naruto a shallow, formal bow. "It is an honor, Uzumaki-san," Tsubaki said, her voice polite but utterly devoid of warmth. Her gaze swept over him, and Naruto felt the distinct sensation of being measured for a coffin. She was the shield, the loyal guardian, and she saw him as a threat to her king. Next was a girl with short, boyish brown hair and an athletic build. Her energy was bright, almost restless. She gave him a sharp, respectful nod. "Tomo Meguri, your knight. A pleasure to work with you." Her greeting was genuine, if a bit loud. Beside her stood a smaller girl with twin pigtails and a cheerful, almost ditzy smile. "Hi. I'm Momo Hanakai. I'm one of Sona Kaishu's bishops. It's super nice to meet you." She seemed excited by the novelty of it all. The other bishop was her polar opposite. A quiet girl with long, straight hair and glasses even thicker than Sona's, she clutched a thick book to her chest like a shield. "Raya Kusaka," she mumbled, barely making eye contact. "And our rooks," Sona finished, indicating the final two members, both of whom were on the other side of the room, presumably having just finished some task. One was a girl with a gentle smile and a quiet demeanor, Tsubasa Yura. The other, Sajin Genshiro, was the only other male in the peerage, a stocky boy who gave Naruto a simple, curious nod. Naruto met each of their gazes in turn, offering a simple, "Yo." The silence that followed was thick with unspoken questions. Sona, ever the pragmatist, cut right through it. "Now that introductions are concluded, we have council business to attend to. Tsubaki, report." Tsubaki stepped forward, her professional mask firmly in place. "Kaicho. At 0630 this morning, we received a formal complaint from the property manager of the commercial district bordering the west side of campus. Over the past week, a small, unaffiliated clan of rogue devils has been attempting to claim the area as their own territory. They've been harassing local businesses with protection rackets and engaging in low-level vandalism to mark their turf." Sona's brow furrowed. "Unaffiliated? Do we have a name?" "They call themselves the Crimson Claws," Tsubaki answered with a hint of disdain. "Led by a mid-class devil named Gorvin. Intel suggests his peerage consists of no more than a dozen members, all low-class strays. They are brutish, but not particularly powerful. However, their actions are a direct challenge to the territory granted to the Gremory and Sitri clans." Sona tapped a finger on her tablet, pulling up a map of the area. "Unacceptable. Their presence destabilizes the fragile peace we maintain. A direct confrontation is likely what they want, it would give them legitimacy. A subtle approach is required." Her mind was already working, gears turning with visible speed. "Tomo, I want you to conduct high-speed reconnaissance. Map their patrol routes and identify their base of operations, but do not engage. Momo, Raya, you will prepare containment fields and transportation circles. We will isolate their leadership and force a negotiation from a position of strength. Tsubaki, you will be my support. We will present them with a contract, cease all activities and vacate Ko territory, or face the full authority of the House of Sitri." It was a brilliant plan. Clean, efficient, and minimizing direct conflict. It was a strategy worthy of a Sitri. Naruto, who had been listening quietly from the side, finally spoke. "What's the goal here?" Sona turned to him, a flicker of annoyance in her eyes at the interruption. "The goal is to remove them from our territory with minimal fuss and to reassert our authority." "Right," Naruto said, nodding. "So you just want them gone?" "That is a simplistic, but accurate, summary," Sona replied condescendingly. Naruto pushed himself off the wall he'd been leaning against. The casual, relaxed air around him suddenly sharpened, replaced by an unnerving stillness. The shift was so sudden that everyone in the room felt it. It was like watching a lazy house cat suddenly morph into a panther. "Okay," he said, his voice calm and even. Give me 1 minute. Sona stared at him, nonplussed. I beg your pardon. 1 minute, Naruto repeated, holding up a single finger. You want them gone? I'll make them gone. Then you can get back to your paperwork. Tomo stifled a laugh, while Momo's eyes went wide. Tsubaki's expression hardened, her hand inching almost imperceptibly towards her side. This was exactly the kind of arrogant disruption she had feared. Uzumaki-san, Sona said, her tone dripping with ice. This is not a street brawl. This is a delicate territorial dispute. It requires strategy and finesse, not blunt force. Your plan is good, Naruto acknowledged, surprising her. It's smart. It'll probably work. But it'll take all day. You'll do recon, set traps, have a long, boring talk, and maybe they'll listen. Or maybe they won't, and you'll have to fight them anyway. It's a waste of time. He met her gaze, and for the first time, she saw a flicker of the power her father had spoken of. It wasn't arrogance in his eyes, it was absolute, unshakable certainty. Let me save you the trouble. Sona was at an impasse. Her logical mind screamed that this was foolish. He was an unknown variable, an untrained element. Allowing him to act unilaterally was a catastrophic risk. But her father's words echoed in her ears, a decisive, overwhelming force. And something else, a strange, nascent curiosity, wanted to see what he would do. She wanted to test the weapon her family had just acquired. She took a deep breath, the decision a bitter pill. 60 seconds, she conceded, her voice tight. Beginning now. Naruto grinned, a flash of the boy he once was. Thanks, Kaicho. And then he was gone. He didn't run. He didn't use a magic circle. One moment he was there, and the next, there was only a faint whisper of displaced air. The council stared at the empty space, their mouths agape. Even Tsubaki's professional calm was shattered, her eyes wide with disbelief. The 60 seconds that followed were the longest of Sona Sitri's life. The pristine silence of her council room felt heavy, suffocating. She stared at the second hand on the wall clock, each tick a hammer blow against her carefully constructed control. 10 seconds. 20. 30. At the 45-second mark, Tsubaki's personal cell phone, a device reserved for only the most urgent and unsecured communications, buzzed violently on the table. Tsubaki snatched it up, her eyes narrowing. Unknown number. Answer it, Sona commanded, her heart starting to pound. Tsubaki swiped the screen and put it on speaker. A panicked, gasping voice filled the room, the sound distorted by fear. Who is this? Is this the Sitri? Identify yourself, Tsubaki ordered, her voice like steel. It's Gorvan. Listen, we're done. We're leaving. We didn't know. We didn't know you had a monster like that. Sona's blood ran cold. What monster? What happened? She demanded. There was a wet, choking sound on the other end. I don't know. 1 second we were in our headquarters, the next, he was just there. In the middle of the room. He didn't even say anything. He just looked at us. And then the shadows moved. The man's voice broke into a terrified sob. They had hands. 12 of him, 100. They took us apart in 5 seconds. Nobody's hurt bad, just tied up. He left us all tied up in a pile in our own damn office. Naruto reappeared in the doorway as suddenly as he had left. He was dusting his hands off, looking completely unfazed. He glanced at the phone in Tsubaki's hand. Ah, looks like they got the message. Sona slowly turned her head to look at him. Her mind, her brilliant, strategic mind, was blank. It was trying to process the impossible. An entire peerage of 12 devils, including a mid-class leader, subdued in less than a minute. Without a fight. Without a single casualty. The voice on the phone whimpered one last thing before the line went dead. There was a note, pinned to my chest with a nail. It just said, "Stay out." Naruto walked over to the table and picked up a stray report, idly flipping through it. "So," he said, changing the subject as if he'd just returned from a coffee break. "What's next on the agenda?" The rest of the council was frozen, staring at him with a mixture of terror and awe. Momo looked like she was about to faint. Tomo's jaw was on the floor. Rhea had dropped her book. But Sona's gaze was different. She looked at the man who was now her betrothed, this impossible being who treated the laws of their world like mere suggestions. She saw the calm in his eyes, the utter lack of pride or malice in his posture. He hadn't done it to show off. He had done it because it was the most efficient way to solve the problem. He wasn't a brute. He was a force of nature. The resentment she had harbored, the cold anger at having her future dictated to her, evaporated in an instant. It was replaced by something far more potent, far more unsettling. It was a dawning, terrifying respect. He wasn't a piece on her meticulously arranged shogi board. He was the hand that could flip the entire table and declare a victory she couldn't even comprehend. Tsubaki, however, saw something else. She saw a power that answered to no one, a loyalty that had not yet been earned. He had protected Sitri territory, yes, but he had done so by ignoring the will of his king. He was not a shield. He was a sword without a hilt, and her suspicion deepened into a cold, professional dread. He was a danger. Not to their enemies, but to the delicate order Sona had worked her entire life to build. Unaware of the storm of emotions he had just unleashed, Naruto looked up from the report and gave Sona a small, questioning smile. "Kaicho? You okay? You look a little pale." Sona pushed her glasses up her nose, her hand trembling almost imperceptibly. "I am fine, Uzumaki-san," she managed to say, her voice strained. Perfectly fine. But she wasn't. For the first time in her life, Sona Sitri had no plan. Chapter 2, The Pawn and the Bishop. The name, Naruto Uzumaki, became a specter haunting the halls of Kuo Academy. It was whispered in crowded corridors between classes, speculated upon in the cafeteria over lunch trays, and debated in the hushed privacy of club rooms. He was the ghost at the feast, the impossible variable. No one knew where he'd come from, a transfer student, they were told, but from where? His records were a black hole of classified information. Yet, he had been instantly installed as a vice president of the student council, a position held only by the most elite, most trusted members of Sona Sitri's inner circle. More than that, he was handsome in a raw, unpolished way that stood out amongst the pretty boys and aspiring idols of the student body. He moved with the lazy, predatory grace of a jungle cat, and when he smiled, a rare, brilliant flash of warmth, it was disarming enough to make girls stop mid-sentence and boys feel an inexplicable urge to stand up straighter. He was an enigma, and the school's rumor mill, a force more potent than any demonic magic, feasted on him. Naruto, for his part, was blissfully, deliberately ignorant of it all. He navigated the sea of stares and whispers with the same ease he'd once navigated hostile forests. He'd learned long ago that the opinions of a crowd were as fickle as the weather. What mattered were the people at his side. He was walking across the manicured quad, the afternoon sun warm on his face, when a familiar scene of chaos erupted nearby. "Pervert," a girl in a kendo uniform shrieked, swinging her bamboo shurnai with deadly intent. It was a misunderstanding, a boy with spiky brown hair yelped, diving behind a hedge. "I was just trying to get a better look at the rare butterfly on the windowsill." A second kendo practitioner cut off his escape route. "The only thing rare around here is your sense of decency, Issei Hayato." Naruto paused, an amused smirk playing on his lips. He watched as the boy, Issei, scrambled away from the furious kendo club members, his escape more luck than skill. Most people saw a lecherous fool, a walking punchline. Naruto saw something else. He focused his senses, not his eyes, and felt the power churning within the boy. It was a chaotic, sleeping inferno, a tempest of rage and draconic pride crammed into a vessel more interested in fleeting glimpses of lingerie than world-shattering power. It was like seeing a god's own warhammer being used to crack nuts. Kurama's voice, a low rumble of cynical amusement, echoed in his mind. A dragon. One of the heavenly ones, if I'm not mistaken. Trapped in a boy whose primary motivation is indecency. What a pathetic vessel. He's just a kid, Naruto projected back, his mental tone patient. He doesn't even know what he is yet. Everyone starts somewhere. You started with a village trying to kill you. He starts by peeping on the girl's locker room. The parallels are truly stunning. Naruto chuckled softly to himself. As he turned to continue on his way, he felt another set of eyes on him. Not the idle curiosity of the student body, but something more focused. More calculating. Across the quad, standing in the shade of an old willow tree, was the Occult Research Club. Ria's Gremory stood at their center, her crimson hair a vibrant slash of color against the green of the grounds. Her blue-green eyes were locked on him, not with hostility, but with the intense scrutiny of a rival monarch assessing a new piece on the board. Beside her, Akino Himejima offered him a playful, knowing smile, her violet eyes crinkling at the corners as if they shared a private joke. Kiba Yuto, the school's prince, gave a slight, curious nod, his hand resting near the hilt of an unseen blade. And standing slightly apart was the diminutive, white-haired girl, Kaneko Tuju, who stared at him with an unervingly blank expression while nibbling on a chocolate bar. They were a peerage. A family. Just like Sona's. And they were all wondering the same thing, what are you? Naruto met Ryasa's gaze directly. He didn't challenge it, nor did he shy away. He simply acknowledged it. With a small, almost imperceptible nod of his own, he turned and continued his walk toward the student council building, leaving the Gremory peerage to their speculation. He had his own family to worry about. The atmosphere in the student council room was still tinged with the aftershocks of the Crimson Claws incident, as Momo had taken to calling it. The rigid formality had been replaced by a tense, uncertain curiosity. They all watched Naruto now, trying to reconcile the easygoing young man who sat at the table with the terrifying force that had dismantled a dozen devils in under a minute. Sona, however, was all business. Her tablet glowed as she brought the meeting to order. Next item, she announced, her voice as crisp as ever. We've received 3 separate reports from local constabularies regarding missing persons. All 3 vanished from the old warehouse district near the docks over the last 2 nights. No signs of struggle, no ransom notes. They are, for all intents and purposes, simply gone. Tsubaki added, the victims have no connection to one another. A homeless man, a night watchman, and a university student who was supposedly ghost hunting. The timing and location strongly suggest supernatural involvement. Most likely a stray devil hunting for sustenance. Sona nodded. A predator is testing our territory. We will handle this tonight. Subtly. I want tracking arrays and a multi-layered containment barrier. Once the stray is located and confined, we will eliminate it. She looked at her 2 bishops. Momo, Rhea. What are your thoughts on tracking a stray of unknown origin and power level? Rhea Kusaka, the quieter of the 2, pushed her thick glasses up and clutched her grimoire. Standard procedure dictates a wide-spectrum magical energy scan, Kaicho. We can filter for demonic signatures that don't match the known profiles of the Gremory or Sitri households. It is, methodologically sound, but the range is limited, and it can produce false positives from residual energies. Momo fidgeted with one of her pigtails. Maybe we could try something else. Like, instead of just searching for energy, we could search for the absence of it. Stray devils they're hungry, right? They consume life force. So maybe the area around them feels colder. Emptier. She shrank back a little as she spoke, as if expecting her idea to be dismissed. It's probably a silly idea. It is not silly, a calm voice interjected. All eyes turned to Naruto. He was leaning back in his chair, looking at Momo with a gentle, encouraging expression. It's a great idea. You're thinking about the nature of the enemy, not just the numbers in a textbook. He then turned to Rhea. Your method is good, too. It's the foundation. But don't just look for the signature. Feel it. Every living thing, every creature, has a unique flavor to its energy. Don't just hunt for a signal. Hunt for a taste. A stray devil like this, one that's desperate and killing. It's going to taste like stale hunger and raw hatred. It's an ugly, jagged feeling. Combine your method with Momo's. Look for a place that feels empty, and then, in the middle of that emptiness, search for that ugly taste. Rhea and Momo stared at him, stunned. He hadn't corrected them. He hadn't dismissed them. He had listened to their ideas, validated them, and then seamlessly blended them into a superior, more intuitive strategy. He was teaching them to be better, not just telling them what to do. Sona watched the exchange, her expression unreadable. Her own methods were based on flawless execution of proven strategies. She demanded perfection. Naruto seemed to be encouraging improvisation. Intuition. It was messy. It was unpredictable. And, she had to admit, it was effective. A sound tactical synthesis, Sona stated, her official approval giving the two girls a visible boost of confidence. We will proceed with that approach. Gear up. We move out at dusk. Twilight painted the sky in shades of orange and deep violet, the last rays of sun glinting off the grimy windows of the abandoned warehouses that lined the Kuo docks. The air was thick with the smell of salt, rust, and decay. It was a place the living world had forgotten, a perfect hunting ground for the things that lurked in the shadows. The student council moved with silent, practiced efficiency. Tomo scouted ahead, a blur of motion darting between crumbling brick buildings, while Saji and Tsubasa secured the perimeter. Sona, Tsubaki, Naruto, Momo, and Rhea formed the central tracking team. I feel it, Momo whispered, her eyes closed in concentration. Over there. She pointed towards a large, dilapidated fish processing plant. It's like she said. A cold spot. The whole area feels drained. Rhea pushed her glasses up, her own brow furrowed. She's right. Anne. I can taste it. It's faint, but it's there. That ugly, jagged feeling you described, Uzumaki-san. She looked at Naruto, a sliver of a proud smile on her lips. It was the first time he had seen her smile. Good work, both of you, Naruto said quietly, giving them both a genuine grin. Momo beamed, and even Rhea's cheeks colored slightly. Sona gave a crisp nod. Confirmed. The target is inside. We proceed as planned. They entered the warehouse through a rusted-shut side door that Naruto simply pushed off its hinges with a gentle, silent shove. The interior was a vast, cavernous space filled with the skeletal remains of old machinery. A thick layer of dust covered everything, and the air was stale and cold. In the center of the room, a hulking shape was hunched over something on the floor. It was humanoid, but its limbs were too long, its back hunched at an unnatural angle. Its skin was the color of a fresh bruise, and ragged, bat-like wings twitched sporadically. It was feeding. Containment team, now, Sona whispered into her comms device. Instantly, glowing blue magic circles materialized on the floor and ceiling around the stray devil. Pillars of solid water, dense as concrete, erupted upwards, forming a cage. It was a perfect, inescapable trap. Or it should have been. The stray devil let out a screech that was pure, distilled rage. It was a sound that scraped at the soul. It whipped its head around, its eyes glowing with a malevolent red light. It was bigger and far more powerful than their intel had suggested. Its claws, long and jagged like shards of obsidian, tore through one of Sona's water pillars. As if it were mist. The carefully constructed prison shattered. Operational parameters failed. Tsubaki shouted, drawing a gleaming rapier of mirrored light. Engage. The stray moved with horrifying speed. It ignored Tsubaki's lunge, instead charging directly towards the casters. It saw the two bishops, Momo and Rhea, as the weakest links, the source of the magic that had tried to bind it. "Rhea, look out!" Momo screamed, pushing her friend out of the way. The stray's claw lashed out. It wasn't aiming to kill, but to maim. The jagged tips raked across Rhea's side as she fell, tearing through her uniform and the flesh beneath. She cried out, a sharp gasp of pain, and collapsed to the ground, clutching her bleeding torso. Everything stopped. For Naruto, the world narrowed to a single point. The panicked shouts of the council, the screech of the monster, the smell of blood in the air, it all faded into a dull background roar. All he saw was one of his people, one of his new comrades, bleeding on the cold concrete floor because he hadn't been fast enough. A cold, familiar fire ignited in his gut. The stray devil, ignoring the wounded girl, turned its attention to the biggest threat it perceived, Sona. The source of the authority, the king of this little group. It lunged, its maw gaping, dripping with a black, viscous saliva. Sona raised her hands, a shield of swirling water forming in front of her, but she knew it wouldn't hold. Tsubaki was too far away to intercept. Tomo was still outside. She braced for impact. It never came. A flicker of gold and black. A whisper of wind. Naruto was suddenly there, standing between her and the monster, his back to her. He hadn't even been in her line of sight a second ago. He hadn't moved, he had simply arrived. He didn't look back. He just raised a hand, palm open, and caught the stray's lunge. Not with a block, but with a simple, solid catch. The creature's massive, clawed hand, which had just torn through solid magic, slammed into his palm and stopped dead, its momentum utterly and completely negated. The stray devil let out a confused, enraged roar and pushed, its powerful muscles straining. It was like watching a truck try to push over a mountain. Naruto didn't even budge. "You made a mistake," Naruto said, his voice dangerously quiet. The warm, easygoing man from the council room was gone. This was someone else. Someone ancient and powerful. The air around him began to hum. Orange pigment flowed around his eyes, forming the horizontal bars of a toad sage. The pressure in the room skyrocketed. It wasn't a magical pressure that the devils were used to. It was the immense, crushing weight of the natural world itself, the energy of oceans and mountains, of life and the planet itself, all focused into one point. The stray devil began to scream, but the sound was different now. It was a shriek of pure, primal terror. Its demonic form, a creature born of negative energy and corruption, was being assaulted by an overwhelming tide of pure, untainted life force. Its skin began to crack and smoke, not from heat, but as if its very essence was being unwritten. It was an infection being scoured by the world's most potent antibiotic. "Get out of my friend's home," Naruto ordered. He didn't throw a punch. He didn't form a Rasengan. He simply clenched the fist that was holding the stray's claw. The sage energy, a visible, shimmering gold aura, surged from him. The stray devil's body convulsed violently. It didn't explode. It didn't burn. It just came apart. It destabilized, its form dissolving into black dust and acrid smoke until, with a final, pathetic whimper, it was gone. All that remained was the foul smell and a profound, ringing silence. The pressure vanished as quickly as it had appeared. The orange marks around Naruto's eyes faded. Just as the last wisp of the stray's essence dissipated, the main doors of the warehouse burst open. Rias Gremory and her entire peerage stood silhouetted against the fading light. They had clearly felt the surge of power and had come to investigate. They arrived just in time to see Naruto standing over the spot where the powerful stray had just been, the air still crackling with residual energy. Sona and her peerage were staring, frozen in shock and awe. "Era, Akino's voice purred, breaking the silence. "Now that is a delicious power. It feels so clean." Kiba's eyes were wide, fixed on Naruto. As a knight, his senses were sharp. He had felt the energy, and it resonated with something deep inside him. It wasn't holy, not like the light of the angels, but it was just as pure, if not more so. It was the energy of life itself. Rias Gremory stepped forward, her regal authority on full display. "What happened here? Sona, what is the meaning of this power surge?" She looked at Naruto, her eyes demanding an explanation. "And who are you?" Naruto didn't even look at her. His attention was elsewhere. He turned, his gaze falling on the small group of his comrades, and then zeroing in on the girl on the floor. He strode past a stunned Sona, ignoring Rias completely, and knelt beside Rhea. "Don't move," he said softly, his voice once again calm and gentle. "It's okay. I've got you." Rhea looked up at him, her face pale, tears of pain in her eyes. It hurts. "I know. Just for a second longer," he promised. He placed his palm flat over her wound, not quite touching the torn flesh. A soft, emerald green light emanated from his hand, warm and profoundly soothing. The council watched, mesmerized, as the light sank into Rhea's body. The bleeding stopped instantly. The torn edges of the wound began to knit together, muscle and skin weaving themselves back into a flawless, unbroken whole. In less than 10 seconds, the grievous injury was gone, leaving behind only the torn fabric of her uniform and smooth, unblemished skin. Naruto pulled his hand away. "There. Good as new." Momo, who had been kneeling on Rhea's other side, stared at him with wide, glistening eyes filled with pure, unadulterated adoration. Rhea, her pain gone, simply stared at the man who had effortlessly destroyed a monster and then just as effortlessly healed her, her expression a complex mixture of gratitude and wonder. Naruto helped her sit up, his movements sure and steady. He finally glanced over his shoulder at the still-waiting Gremory peerage. "The situation is handled," he said, his tone polite but dismissive. "This is Sitri clan business." He stood up and turned his full attention back to the council. "Everyone okay?" Tomo gave a shaky nod. Tsubaki was staring at the spot where the stray had been, her mind struggling to process the sheer, casual finality of its destruction. Sona finally found her voice. "We are unharmed. Thanks to you." Naruto just nodded. "Good. Let's get back. Rhea should still take it easy." He looked at Momo. "You were brave, pushing her out of the way like that. That was a good instinct." Momo blushed furiously, ducking her head. Thank you, Uzumaki-san." Later that night, in the quiet sanctum of the student council room, Tsubaki stood before Sona's desk. The others were gone, Momo and a still shaken but healthy Rhea had been sent home to rest. "Kaicho," Tsubaki began, her voice low and formal, but carrying a new, different weight. "Regarding the subject, Naruto Uzumaki." Sona looked up from her tablet, where she had been staring at the same blank page for 10 minutes. "Go on, Tsubaki." "His intervention was absolute," Tsubaki said, choosing her words with care. "He acted when our operational parameters failed. When the threat escalated beyond my capacity to intercept, he neutralized it instantly." She paused, her gaze meeting Sona's. "When Rhea was injured, his immediate and only priority became the safety of a peerage member. He ignored a direct address from Rias Gremory, a high-class heiress, to render aid. His methods are chaotic and disregard protocol, but, his loyalties, at least in that moment, were clearly with us. He is not just a weapon, Kaicho. He is a guardian." Sona looked towards the empty chair Naruto had occupied earlier. "A guardian." The word resonated with what she had seen. He had shielded her, healed her bishop, and calmed her pawn. He hadn't acted for glory or to show off his power. He had acted to protect them. To protect his people. The political pawn her father had placed on her board was turning out to be a king in his own right, one who protected his pieces with a ferocity that defied all strategy. And for the second time in as many days, Sona Sitri felt the terrifying, exhilarating sensation of her perfectly ordered world spinning completely out of her control. Chapter 3, The Pride of Phoenix. Word of the Sitri's new asset spread through the underworld's intricate web of gossip and intelligence like a wildfire through a dry forest. The official story was clean, clinical. Sona Sitri's peerage had efficiently eliminated a powerful stray devil. But the unofficial story, pieced together from residual energy readings, panicked whispers from low-level informers who had been in the area, and the pointed silence from Rias Gremory's camp, was far more interesting. It spoke of a power that wasn't demonic, holy, or draconic. A power that felt like life itself, wielded with terrifying finality. A power that belonged to an unknown, a golden-haired boy who was now, by decree, the betrothed of the Sitri heiress. This news, naturally, found its way to the ears of Riser Phoenix. Riser was in Ko town for a preliminary meeting regarding his own engagement to Rias Gremory, a political marriage he considered a foregone conclusion and a matter of supreme conquest. He held court in the most expensive suite of the most luxurious human world hotel, surrounded by the adoring members of his all-female peerage. He was lounging on a velvet chaise, a glass of impossibly old demonic wine in his hand, when his queen, Yubaluna, delivered the report. And sources confirm he is now enrolled at Ko Academy, holding the title of vice president alongside Tsubaki Shinra, Yubaluna concluded, her tone one of professional diligence. Riser swirled the deep red liquid in his glass, a smirk twisting his handsome, arrogant features. Sona Sitri. The ice doll. Betrothed. Riser is surprised she has enough warmth in her to entertain such a concept. He took a slow sip. And to some unknown upstart, no less. How pathetic. The great house of Sitri, so desperate for a foothold that they've latched onto a piece of driftwood. His peerage giggled in sycophantic agreement. They say he is powerful, my lord, Yubaluna added cautiously. Riser let out a short, barking laugh. Powerful? My dear Yubaluna, a firecracker is powerful until it is placed next to the sun. There is power, and then there is Phoenix power. We are eternal. We are absolute. This Naruto Uzumaki is a footnote. A novelty. He set his glass down with a decisive click and rose to his feet, a predatory gleam in his eyes. The casual arrogance had sharpened into a focused, cruel amusement. Riser is in town for Rias, but it seems a small detour is in order. It is a lord's duty to put ambitious mongrels in their place, lest they forget the natural order of things. And besides, he ran a possessive gaze over his assembled women. It has been some time since Riser has had a chance to remind the other houses what true strength looks like. We shall pay a visit to this academy. He had no grand strategy. He had no political objective. His motivation was simpler, more primal, pure, unadulterated hubris. He heard of a new, supposedly dangerous animal in his territory, and his first and only instinct was to go and kick it to see what it would do. The courtyard of Ko Academy was, for a brief moment, an island of idyllic peace. The sun was high, students were milling about during their lunch break, their laughter and chatter a gentle hum. The student council had just finished their midday patrol, ensuring no rules were being broken, no uniforms were out of compliance. It was mundane, orderly work, and Naruto found a strange comfort in it. Uzumaki-san, Tomo said, falling into step beside him as they walked back toward the main building. I've been working on that intuitive energy tracking you taught Momo and Rhea. I think I'm getting the hang of it. Yeah? Naruto asked, giving her his full attention. What do you feel? Well, I can feel the life force of all the students, kinda like a low hum, she explained, her brow furrowed in concentration. And I can feel the demonic energy from Kaicho and the others, which is sharper, more defined. But yours, she glanced at him, her expression a mixture of awe and confusion, yours feels like the sun. It's just, everywhere. It's not loud, but it's so big it's hard to focus on anything else. Before Naruto could respond, the atmosphere of the entire courtyard shifted. A large, ornate magic circle, blazing with the golden-orange crest of the House of Phoenix, erupted in the center of the quad. The air crackled with heat and raw power. The chatter of the students died instantly, replaced by gasps and frightened murmurs. From the pillar of fire and light, 16 figures emerged. Riser Phoenix stood at their head, clad in a ridiculous wine-red suit, his blonde hair perfectly coiffed. He scanned the courtyard with an air of supreme boredom, his gaze sweeping over the terrified human students as if they were insects. Behind him, his 15 peerage members fanned out, a collection of beautiful women in maid outfits, each radiating a palpable aura of demonic power. Sona and her council, who had been a few paces ahead, stopped dead. Sona's face became a mask of cold fury. "Riser Phoenix," she said, her voice dangerously low. "Your presence here is unsanctioned. You are violating the territorial accords." Riser's eyes landed on her, and a slow, lecherous smile spread across his face. "Ah, Sona Sitri. As cold and rigid as ever. Riser is merely paying a social call. And Riser goes where he pleases." His eyes slid past her, landing on Tsubaki, then Momo, then Rhea, his gaze lingering on each of them with gross possessiveness. "You've collected some lovely new pets, I see." Riser is impressed. "Perhaps after Riser is done with Rias, he might make you an offer for a few of them." Tsubaki's hand flew to the small mirror she wore on her uniform, her knuckles white. Momo and Rhea shrank back, looks of disgust and fear on their faces. Tomo drew herself up, her hand instinctively going to where her sword would be. Sona's eyes flashed with violet light. "You will retract that statement, Riser. Now. Or what?" Riser mocked, taking a step forward. "You'll splash Riser with some water?" Adorable. His gaze finally found Naruto, who had been standing silently behind the girls, watching the scene unfold with a disconcerting calmness. "Ah, and this must be the stray dog you've picked up. The talk of the town." Riser looked Naruto up and down, his expression dripping with contempt. "You are the one they call Naruto Uzumaki." Riser is, underwhelmed. "You look more like a farmhand than a powerhouse." Naruto didn't react. He just watched. He had met men like Riser before. Men whose strength was a gift, not an achievement. Men whose arrogance was a shield for a deep, hollow insecurity. They were loud, they were flashy, and they were, without exception, profoundly fragile. "I'm going to give you some friendly advice," Naruto said, his voice quiet but carrying across the unnaturally silent courtyard. "These girls you just insulted? They're my friends. The woman you're disrespecting? She's my fiancée. You have 10 seconds to apologize to them and get your circus off this school's property." Riser stared at him for a beat, then threw his head back and roared with laughter. It was a loud, grating sound that made the students flinch. "Apologize? You, a no-name peasant, are giving me, Riser Phoenix, advice? Your arrogance is almost entertaining." He snapped his fingers. "Ladies," he purred. "Teach this whelp some manners. Don't kill him. Riser wants him conscious when he begs." 4 of his pawns, a matched set of quadruplet sisters, blurred into motion, surrounding Naruto in a flash. His queen, Yubaluna, began chanting, a massive ball of purple energy forming above her head. His rooks, big, powerful women, cracked their knuckles, grinning sadistically. The rest of his peerage prepared their own attacks. They were a well-oiled machine, ready to overwhelm their target with numbers and coordinated assaults. Sona cried out, "Naruto, no." She prepared to erect a water barrier, but she was too late. The 4 pawns struck simultaneously from 4 different directions, their fists wreathed in flame. 9. Naruto counted under his breath. A split second before their fists would have connected, he vanished. Not in a burst of speed, but as if the space he occupied had simply become empty. The 4 pawns punched through thin air, their momentum carrying them into a clumsy collision in the center. What? Before they could recover, something slammed into the back of each of their necks. It wasn't a powerful blow, just a sharp, precise chop. They collapsed in an unconscious heap. 8. From the rooftop of the school building, a dozen identical Narutos dropped into the courtyard. Shadow clones. They moved with silent, fluid grace, each one radiating the same unnerving calm as the original. The human students gasped. The Phoenix Peerage faltered, their coordinated attack plan thrown into chaos. Split up, the original Naruto said from his new position beside Sona. He hadn't moved to her side, he had simply appeared there, as if he had been there all along. The clones obeyed instantly. What followed was not a battle. It was a symphony of humiliation. A clone appeared behind Riser's 2 knights, who were preparing a pincer attack. The clone didn't fight them. It simply grabbed the backs of their maid uniforms and slammed them face first into each other. They went down with a comical clank of heads. Another clone faced Riser's bishops, who were preparing a complex magical bombardment. The clone formed 2 minuscule raisingans, no bigger than marbles, in his palms. He didn't throw them. He just flickered forward and gently tapped each girl on the forehead. The spinning chakra disrupted their concentration instantly, causing their spells to backfire in a shower of harmless pink sparks. They squeaked in surprise and fell backward, dazed. Yubaluna, Riser's queen, finally unleashed her massive energy blast. It screamed toward the main group of clones. They didn't even try to dodge. They just stood there and let it hit them, disappearing in puffs of smoke. Yubaluna smirked in triumph, only to feel a tap on her shoulder. A single clone stood behind her, holding her own attack spell, a perfect, miniature copy of it, in his palm. "That's a nice trick," the clone said, before dispelling the copied attack into nothing. He then flicked her on the nose. It wasn't a hit. It was a dismissal. The sheer audacity of it left her sputtering in disbelief. In less than 15 seconds, all 14 members of Riser Phoenix's peerage were on the ground. None were seriously injured. They were disarmed, disoriented, or unconscious, defeated with an efficiency that was both breathtaking and deeply insulting. The clones dispelled themselves, leaving only the original Naruto standing there, his hands back in his pockets. The entire courtyard, students, Sona's council, and Riser himself, was utterly silent. Riser stared at the scene, his jaw slack. His brain, so used to victory and adulation, couldn't process what had just happened. His entire, vaunted peerage, the pride of his house, had been neutralized in seconds by what looked like a bunch of party tricks. The arrogance in his eyes was replaced by a furious, sputtering rage. You dare," he shrieked, his body bursting into flames. "You dare mock the House of Phoenix. Riser will burn you to cinders. Riser is immortal. You cannot defeat Riser." Wings of fire erupted from his back, and the heat radiating from him was intense enough to make the air shimmer. The students cried out and scrambled back. Sona stepped forward. "Naruto, get back." "His flames, it's fine, Sona," Naruto said, his voice still calm. He held up a hand to stop her, his eyes never leaving Riser. "Let him have his tantrum." Riser screamed and launched himself at Naruto, a meteor of hellfire and fury. "Die." Naruto didn't move. He just watched the attack come. At the very last second, when Riser's flaming fist was inches from his face, he closed his eyes. The orange pigment of sage mode flooded his features. The air around him grew heavy, dense with the crushing weight of natural energy. He raised his right hand. A sphere of swirling, howling wind appeared in his palm, a miniature hurricane. But it was more than that. For massive, blade-like points erupted from the sphere, spinning at impossible speeds. The sound it made was deafening, a high-pitched shriek that felt like it was tearing reality itself apart at the seams. Wind style, Raisin Shuriken. Riser's eyes went wide with terror. His instincts, buried under a lifetime of arrogance, screamed at him. That sphere wasn't just power. It was death. It was an attack that wouldn't just burn him, it would annihilate him on a level his regeneration couldn't comprehend. It was a storm of microscopic blades that would shred him, cell by cell. Naruto didn't throw it. He held the screaming sphere of destruction inches from Riser's face. The sheer force of the wind pressure alone was enough to shred Riser's expensive suit to tatters and blast his perfectly coiffed hair into a frazzled mess. The phoenix flames around Riser's body flickered and died, snuffed out by the overwhelming force. His immortality, his ultimate trump card, felt like a sick joke in the face of an attack that could unmake him. Riser was frozen, his body trembling uncontrollably. His face, inches from oblivion, was a mask of pure, abject terror. Tears and snot streamed down his face. The proud lord of the House of Phoenix was broken. "Do you still feel like a son?" Naruto asked, his voice a low growl. Riser couldn't speak. He could only make a series of pathetic, whimpering noises. "I didn't think so," Naruto said. He dispelled the Raisin Shuriken as if switching off a light. The sound vanished. The pressure was gone. He looked at the trembling, half-naked devil lord quivering before him. "Get lost," he said simply. That was all it took. Riser Phoenix let out a choked sob, scrambled to his feet, and fled. He didn't even try to gather his peerage. He just opened a clumsy, panicked magic circle and threw himself through it, vanishing from sight. His peerage members, slowly coming to, witnessed their lord's utter humiliation. Shamefaced and terrified, they gathered their unconscious comrades and beat a hasty retreat of their own. The courtyard was silent for a long moment. Then, someone started clapping. It was a single student, then another, then the entire student body erupted into thunderous applause and cheers. They didn't understand the demonic politics, but they understood what they saw. A bully had come to their school, threatened their student council, and had been utterly and completely humbled by their new vice president. Naruto paid them no mind. He turned back to the student council. To Sona. Sona was staring at him, her mouth slightly agape, her usual composure completely gone. Her mind was replaying the event, the casual dismissal of an entire peerage, the manifestation of an attack so powerful it had terrified an immortal into submission. Her father had wanted a deterrent. A decisive force. What she was looking at was a god of war in a school uniform. And in that moment, seeing the quiet strength in his eyes as he looked at her, she felt a foreign, unfamiliar emotion bloom in her chest. It was hot and fierce and completely illogical. It was pride. A fierce, possessive pride in the man standing before her. Her betrothed. Tsubaki stepped forward, her movements stiff. She walked past Sona and stopped directly in front of Naruto. The entire courtyard held its breath, expecting a confrontation, a reprimand for his unilateral, devastating actions. She took a deep breath, and then she bowed. It wasn't the shallow, formal bow from the day before. It was a deep, respectful bow, a bow of a knight to a protector. "Thank you, Uzumaki-san," she said, her voice clear and sincere, all traces of ice gone, replaced by a grudging, hard-won respect. "For defending our president, and us." Naruto just gave a small, almost shy smile. "No problem, Tsubaki-chan. He was pissing me off." The informal use of her name, the simple, honest reason for his actions, cracked the last of her icy demeanor. A faint, genuine smile touched Tsubaki's lips. It was a small victory, but in the quiet war for the heart of the student council, it was as decisive as the battle that had just been won. Chapter 4, an echo in the static. The humiliation of Riser Phoenix sent a tremor, not a shockwave, through the supernatural world. To the great houses and the faction leaders, Riser was a loud-mouthed annoyance, his defeat more a source of private amusement than genuine alarm. But the method of his defeat was another matter entirely. The reports, now cross-referenced with the stray devil incident, painted a deeply unsettling picture. This Naruto Uzumaki didn't fight like a devil, angel, or fallen. He didn't wield magic in the conventional sense. He commanded a power that seemed to operate on a different set of rules, and that made him dangerously unpredictable. A single, encrypted message found its way to Naruto through the Sitri clan's secure channels. It was from Azazel, the Governor-General of the Fallen Angels. The message was informal, almost annoyingly casual. Heard you swatted the Phoenix pest. Nicely done. That level of power control is fascinating. I'm building a new prototype sacred gear based on localized reality warping, and your energy signature gives me ideas. Let's meet. I'll buy you a beer. Naruto read the message on a datapad Sona had given him and promptly deleted it. You are ignoring a direct summons from the leader of the Grigori? Sona asked, raising an eyebrow. She was standing by the window of the council room, observing the evening sports club's practice on the fields below. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows, painting the room in hues of orange and gray. It wasn't a summons, Naruto replied, leaning back in his chair and lacing his fingers behind his head. It was a feeler. He's curious. He wants to stick me under a microscope and see what makes me tick. I've got better things to do. Forging an alliance with the Grigori could be a significant political advantage, Sona countered, her mind always on the strategic angle. And showing all my cards to a man famous for collecting dangerous weapons is a significant tactical disadvantage, Naruto retorted easily. We'll talk when I have something I need from him. Not before. Sona turned from the window to look at him. His confidence was infuriating, and yet, she couldn't argue with his logic. He was playing the game, but he was playing by his own rules, hoarding his influence like a dragon hoards gold, refusing to spend it on anything he deemed unimportant. In a world of posturing and power plays, his absolute refusal to engage was, in itself, a powerful statement. Before she could formulate a reply, a piercing alarm blared through the room, a high-pitched, urgent tone reserved for only the most critical security breaches. Sona was at her main console in an instant, her fingers flying across the holographic interface. Tsubaki and the other council members, who had been working on their own tasks, were on their feet immediately, their expressions grim. What is it? Tsubaki asked, her hand already on her mirror. Silent alarm from Sublevel 7, Sona reported, her eyes narrowed in concentration as she scanned the data feeds. Multiple encrypted seals bypassed. It's a high-level intrusion. They're targeting the Dimensional Energy Research Lab. Naruto sat up, his relaxed posture gone. Research lab? Under the school. The Sitri family sponsors various research projects, Sona explained tersely, not taking her eyes off the screen. Sub-level 7 houses our most sensitive work, theoretical magic, sacred gear analysis, and preliminary studies on interdimensional energy signatures. It is one of the most secure facilities in the human world. Guess not secure enough, Naruto muttered. He stood up. Who's the enemy? The breach signature matches protocols used by the Chaos Brigade, Tsubaki answered, her voice tight with anger. Specifically, the Magician faction. They're not just smashing and grabbing. This is a surgical strike. They knew the layout. They knew the security codes. This is an inside job, or they have a traitor on the research team. Sona's face was grim. The data on dimensional energy was not just theoretical. It contained sensitive information about weaknesses in the fabric of their reality, potential doorways between worlds. In the hands of the Chaos Brigade, it could be used to summon things far worse than stray devils. They've sealed the sector, Sona said, her fingers still a blur. They've erected a barrier that's scrambling our teleportation circles. We can't jump in directly. Then we use the front door, Naruto said, already walking towards the exit. Wait, Sona commanded. She pulled up a detailed schematic of the sublevels. The crimson indicators of the enemy barrier pulsed angrily. This isn't a brawl, Naruto. This is a fortress infiltration. The magician faction will have laid dozens of magical traps, logic bombs, and countermeasure fields between the entrance and the lab. If we rush in blindly, we'll be torn apart before we even see them. She began outlining a complex, multi-pronged assault. Tomo and Tsubaki, you'll lead a feint on the eastern access corridor. Your speed should allow you to trigger their outer perimeter traps without taking damage, drawing their attention. Momo, Rhea, you will stay with me. We will analyze the energy flow of their barrier from the main stairwell, find a harmonic weakness, and create a breach. Saji, Tsubasa, you'll be our rear guard. It was a solid plan, textbook Sitri strategy. Precise, analytical, and cautious. Naruto listened patiently until she was finished. Then he pointed to a single spot on the map, the main, heavily fortified entrance to the research sector. Your plan is good, he said, echoing his sentiment from the Crimson Claws incident. But it's reactive. You're letting them set the pace. Let me change one thing. He looked at Sona, his blue eyes holding an intensity that demanded her full attention. They expect a feint. They expect a careful, strategic approach. They don't expect the front door to come crashing down. Let me be the distraction. A real one. I'll go in loud and hard right down the middle. I'll draw every eye, every spell, every trap. While they're focused on me, your team can execute your plan without opposition. Sona stared at the map, then at him. It was a madman's plan. A suicide run. He was volunteering to be the anvil for her hammer. But it was also brilliant in its brutal simplicity. The Cow's Brigade cell would never anticipate such a direct, reckless assault. It would throw their entire defensive strategy into chaos. Your survival probability is low, she stated, the words tasting like ash. Naruto gave her a confident, almost wolfish grin. Don't worry about me, Kaicho. I'm hard to kill. The unspoken trust in his gaze was absolute. He wasn't questioning her ability to get the job done. He was simply offering her the perfect opportunity to do it. She took a deep breath. All right, she agreed, her heart pounding. Do it. The reinforced blast door to sublevel 7 looked like the entrance to a doomsday bunker. It was a foot of solid steel alloy, interwoven with defensive magic runes that pulsed with a faint blue light. Naruto stood before it, the rest of the council waiting a safe distance down the corridor. He took a slow breath, sinking into a low stance. He held out his right hand, and a familiar, swirling ball of blue energy materialized in his palm. A Rasengan. But then he did something else. He poured a massive amount of his own chakra into it, causing it to swell to 3 times its normal size, its rotation becoming so violent it screamed. A great ball Rasengan. He didn't thrust it. He didn't run. He just slammed it, palm first, into the center of the door. The impact wasn't an explosion. It was a grinding, tearing concussion of pure power. The magic runes on the door flared violently and then shattered like glass. The steel groaned, buckled, and then was torn from its hinges, flying down the corridor beyond like a piece of tin foil. The entire corridor shook. Naruto stepped through the gaping, mangled hole into the enemy-held territory. Hey, he yelled into the darkness, his voice echoing off the walls. Is this the party? I heard you guys were looking for some data. I've got it right here. Come and get it. Immediately, the corridor erupted. Runes on the walls flared to life, firing bolts of chaotic energy. The floor plates shifted, trying to trap his feet. Golems of scrap metal and stone animated from the walls, their eyes glowing with malevolent red light. Naruto just grinned. Now we're talking. He moved like a golden blur. He sidestepped the energy bolts, leapt over the snapping floor traps, and met the golems head-on. He didn't use ninjutsu. This was pure, unadulterated taijutsu. A spinning kick shattered a stone golem's torso. A precise, open palm strike to a metal golem's core caused it to short-circuit and collapse. He was a whirlwind of controlled violence, systematically dismantling every trap and every defender in his path, all while shouting taunts and insults to draw more attention. Meanwhile, Sona and her team moved in behind him, using the chaos as cover. The corridor he left behind was a wreck, but it was a safe wreck. He's triggered every single trap on the main thoroughfare, Momo whispered in awe, watching the distant flashes of light and explosions. He's not just triggering them, he's destroying them, Tsubaki corrected, her eyes wide. He's not a distraction. He's a one-man army clearing a path. Sona's focus was absolute. He's buying us time. Let's not waste it. Rhea, Momo, find me a weak point in their main barrier. Now. As Naruto carved his way deeper into the facility, he finally came face to face with the Chaos Brigade magicians themselves. There were 5 of them, led by a tall, sneering man in ornate robes. So, the Sitri's pet has some teeth, the lead magician sneered, raising a staff that crackled with purple lightning. Your foolishness ends here, boy. You face the elite of the magician's faction. They attacked as one, weaving a complex web of spells designed to disorient, immobilize, and destroy. Chains of shadow energy erupted from the floor, light-based lances shot from the air, and a curse that felt like ice and razor blades tried to sink into Naruto's skin. It was like trying to catch smoke with a net. Naruto flowed through the barrage of spells, his sage mode senses screaming warnings a full second before each attack manifested. He was a ghost in their midst. A shadow clone appeared behind one magician, delivering a sharp chop to the neck. He slid under a bolt of lightning, his leg sweeping out to trip another. He grabbed a third by the robes and used him as a human shield against a volley of light lances, the magician screaming as his own comrade's spell slammed into him. It was brutally, chaotically efficient. He was turning their teamwork, their greatest strength, against them. It was in the midst of this chaotic brawl that it happened. For one single, horrifying instant, everything stopped. The crackle of the lead magician's staff went silent. The glow of the shadow chains faded. The shimmering air from a pending fire spell turned normal. Every ounce of magic in the area, the Chaos Brigades, the residual energy from the traps, even the faint Sitri signature from Sona's team down the hall, vanished. It didn't fizzle. It was erased. A profound, unnatural silence descended. It was more than the absence of sound. It was the absence of energy, of life, of presence. The air grew cold and thin, like at the top of the highest mountain. The lights in the corridor flickered and died, plunging them into a deep, oppressive darkness. In that suffocating void, only one light remained, the brilliant, golden aura of Naruto's sage mode. It burned like a solitary candle in an infinite, black room, a defiant spark of life in a universe of nothing. The magicians were frozen, their faces masks of confusion and terror. Their connection to the world's magical flow had been severed. They were powerless. Naruto froze too, his senses screaming a new kind of warning. This wasn't a technique. This wasn't a jutsu. This was something else. Something fundamentally wrong. He scanned the darkness, his sage-enhanced senses stretching out, and he felt a hole. A patch of reality that wasn't there. And from across corridor at the far end of the hall, he saw it. It wasn't a person. It was a silhouette. A figure cloaked in an aura that didn't radiate energy, but absorbed it. It was a walking void, a human-shaped patch of absolute nothingness. It had no face, no features, just an outline that seemed to drink the light and warp the space around it. The silence, the null energy field, emanated from it. This was an arbiter of silence. A scout. The silhouette turned its head, and Naruto felt its attention lock onto him. He didn't feel scanned or analyzed. He felt observed, the way a biologist observes a microbe, with cold, cosmic detachment. He was the anomaly. The loudest thing in the room. The moment stretched for an eternity. Then, just as suddenly as it had come, the silence ended. Magic flooded back into the world with a painful rush, like air into a vacuum. The lights flickered back on. The magician's spells reignited. The presence, the silhouette, was gone. Naruto was shaken to his core. The sensation had been more terrifying than facing down Kaguya. It was a confrontation with non-existence itself. But the battle wasn't over. The lead magician, recovering from the bizarre phenomenon, screamed in rage and unleashed a torrent of lightning. Naruto's battle instincts took over. Shaking off the cosmic dread, he formed a Rasengan and charged, ending the fight with a decisive, non-lethal blow that sent the leader crashing into the wall, unconscious. Just as he did, Sona, Tsubaki, and the others arrived, having breached the now weakened barrier. They found Naruto standing over the groaning, defeated forms of the entire Chaos Brigade cell. "The lab is secure," Tsubaki reported, having already scouted ahead. They hadn't breached the final vault. Sona looked at the devastation, then at Naruto. "Are you alright?" "My sensors detected a complete nullification of all magical energy for approximately 3.7 seconds. "What was that?" Naruto's face was grim. The adrenaline was fading, replaced by a cold unease. "We have a bigger problem than the Chaos Brigade," he said, his voice low. Later, after the captured magicians had been secured and the facility locked down, Naruto and Sona stood alone in the quiet council room. The moon cast a pale, silver light through the large windows. Naruto described what he had seen. The sudden, absolute silence. The feeling of being erased. The figure that was a hole in the world. Sona listened, her expression growing more and more serious with every word. She cross-referenced his description with every known phenomenon in the devil, angel, and fallen angel databases. She searched for lore on ancient gods, primordial entities, and conceptual beings. Nothing. "What you are describing is a logical impossibility," she finally said, pushing her glasses up her nose, though the gesture lacked its usual confident snap. "An entity that erases energy on a conceptual level defies every known law of magic, physics, and theology. It's not a power. It's an anti-power." "It felt empty," Naruto said, staring out the window at the dark sky. Like it wanted everything else to be as empty as it was. He and Sona looked at each other, a new, unspoken understanding passing between them. The Crimson Claws, Riser Phoenix, even the Chaos Brigade, they were all just squabbles. Border disputes. Gang fights. They were manageable threats, problems with solutions. This was different. This was an existential threat. An enemy whose very nature was hostile to their existence. An enemy that had looked at a room full of powerful magicians and had only been interested in the one boy burning with the light of a different world. For the first time, Naruto realized the dimensional tear hadn't just brought him here. Something had followed him through the static. Chapter 5, The Knight's Vow. The rooks resolved the specter of the silent, faceless enemy lingered in the back of their minds, a cold stone of dread that couldn't be dislodged. But the world, heedless of cosmic threats, continued to turn. The student council still had duties, the school still had rules, and the intricate, often petty politics of the underworld still ground on. It was in this crucible of the mundane that the true strength of their new bonds would be forged. The shift in the council's dynamic was subtle, but palpable. The awe and fear inspired by Naruto's power had softened, replaced by a comfortable, protective familiarity. He wasn't just a weapon or a trump card anymore. He was the one who had cleared the path for them in the lab, who taught Momo and Rhea to trust their instincts, who had taken a hit for Sona without a second thought. He was becoming their anchor. Tomo Meguri, the council's knight, was usually a whirlwind of cheerful energy, her boisterous confidence a constant, reassuring presence. For the past 2 days, however, she had been quiet. Her movements were just as fast, her greetings just as loud, but the light in her eyes was dimmed. There was a worry gnawing at her, and she was doing a poor job of hiding it. Naruto noticed it during their morning sparring session. He'd made it a habit to train with each of the council members, learning their strengths and helping them shore up their weaknesses. Tomo, with her focus on high-speed combat, was his most frequent partner. They were in the academy's gym, a blur of motion. Tomo's attacks were fast, a flurry of precise kicks and chops aimed at Naruto's openings. Naruto, moving at only a fraction of his true speed, parried and dodged, his movements fluid and effortless. "You're telegraphing your lead kick," Naruto said, easily sidestepping a roundhouse. "You're dropping your shoulder half a second before you throw it." "I am not." Tomo retorted, but her follow-up jab was weak, distracted. Naruto stopped, dropping his defensive posture. "All right, spill it." Tomo faltered, her own aggressive stance crumbling. "Spill what?" "I'm fine. Let's go." She bounced on the balls of her feet, trying to project an energy she clearly didn't feel. "No, you're not," Naruto said, his voice gentle but firm. "You've had that look on your face for 2 days. The one that says you're trying to solve a problem by running headfirst into it 100 times, hoping it'll break before you do. I know that look. I invented it." Tomo's energetic facade finally broke. She slumped, her shoulders dropping, and let out a long, frustrated sigh. She ran a hand through her short, boyish hair. "Is it that obvious?" "To me, yeah." She paced a few steps away, her back to him. "It's my family," she said, her voice tight. "We're not a big house. We're minor nobility, barely a footnote in the grand scheme of things. My contract with Kaicho, it was a huge honor for us. A Meguri serving as the knight for the Sitri heiress. It elevated our status immensely." She stopped and turned back to face him, her expression a mixture of anger and despair. "But now, because of the betrothal, some of the more conservative houses are getting nervous. They see you as an unknown, a source of instability. They think the Sitri are gambling, and they don't want to be caught in the fallout." She kicked at an imaginary stone on the gym floor. "The House of Gladiolabalas is one of them. They're a bunch of arrogant, scheming snakes. They've been pressuring my family. They want my father to break my contract with Sona and have me serve the third son of their main house instead. They're framing it as a more stable alliance." Naruto's eyes narrowed. "They're trying to poach you." "Worse," Tomo said, her voice cracking slightly. "My parents, they're considering it. They're terrified of offending a more powerful family. They think it's the safest move for us. They've called a meeting for tonight. My father, me, and Lord Gladiolabalas's main steward. They want me to formally request a release from my contract." Tears of frustration welled in her eyes. "I would never leave Kaicho. My loyalty is to her, to this council. But to go against my own family, to shame them in front of another house. I don't know what to do, Naruto. If I fight them, I bring shame to my family. If I don't, I betray my king." She was trapped. A pawn in a game played by lords and politicians, her loyalty and her duty pulling her in opposite directions. Naruto was silent for a long moment. He walked over to her, his expression serious. "Where's the meeting?" "The Lucille Blue restaurant downtown," she mumbled. "A neutral ground." "Okay," Naruto said simply. "I'm coming with you." Tomo's head snapped up. "What? No. You can't. It would be an insult. It would be like the Sitri clan sending in a hammer to intimidate them. It would make everything 1,000 times worse." "Who said anything about intimidation?" Naruto asked, a small, confident smile touching his lips. I'm not going as a hammer. I'm going as your friend. Your vice president. Just to offer a bit of moral support. The Le Ciel Bleu was the kind of restaurant where the silence was more expensive than the wine. It was a place of hushed tones and delicate negotiations, where fortunes were won and lost over plates of food that were more art than sustenance. Tomo, dressed in a formal black dress, sat stiffly at a private table, her hands clenched in her lap. Across from her sat her father, a tired-looking man whose face was etched with worry. At the head of the table sat the Gladiolabla's steward, a smirking, reptilian man named Valen, whose arrogant posture made it clear he considered this meeting a mere formality. Meguridano, Valen said, his voice oozing condescension, let us not prolong this. The House of Gladiolablas is offering you a prestigious opportunity. A chance to align with a rising power, a stable power. The Sitri, with their recent, unorthodox alliance, represent an unknown future. We represent security. Tomo's father shifted uncomfortably. Valendano, my daughter's loyalty to Lady Sitri is admirable, but misguided, Valen cut him off. Loyalty to a sinking ship is not a virtue, it is foolishness. Tomo-san, he turned his oily smile on her, simply make the request. No one will fault you for making the prudent choice for your family's future. Tomo opened her mouth to refuse, to scream, to fight, but the words caught in her throat. The weight of her father's pleading eyes, the pressure of a great house, it was all suffocating her. Just then, a waiter approached the table. Pardon the intrusion. You have another guest. Valen looked up, annoyed. We are not expecting anyone else. Naruto walked into the private dining area, wearing a simple but well-fitted black suit Sona had insisted he acquire for such occasions. He looked completely at ease, as if he owned the place. He pulled up an empty chair from a nearby table and sat down next to Tomo, giving her a reassuring wink that only she saw. Valen's eyes narrowed. And who are you? Naruto Uzumaki, he introduced himself, his tone pleasant. Student Council Vice President, Kuo Academy. And Tomo-chan's friend. He nodded politely to Tomo's father. Meguridano, a pleasure. Then he looked at Valen, his friendly demeanor not quite reaching his eyes. You must be the guy trying to bully my knight into breaking her contract. Valen's face flushed with anger. This is a private matter between houses. It does not concern you, boy. It concerns me when my friend is being backed into a corner, Naruto said, his voice losing its pleasant edge. He leaned forward, resting his elbows on the table. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't let his power flare. He just spoke. Let me ask you something, Valen-san. What do you think the strength of a house is built on? Valen scoffed. Power. Influence. Wealth. Wrong, Naruto said flatly. It's built on loyalty. Not the kind you buy or threaten people into giving. The real kind. The kind that makes someone willing to stand and fight for the person next to them. He glanced at Tomo, his expression softening. I've only known Tomo for a short time, but I've seen that loyalty. I saw it when she stood ready to defend her king from Riser Phoenix. I saw it when she raced to be the first one to check on her friends after the lab incident. Her loyalty is like tempered steel. It's the most valuable thing she has. He turned his gaze back to Valen, and now his eyes were as hard as diamonds. And you want her to throw that away. You want her to prove that her word is meaningless, that her promises can be broken if a better offer comes along. You're not asking her to join your house. You're asking her to become as worthless as you are. Valen shot to his feet, his face purple with rage. How dare you? You will pay for that insult. No, I don't think I will, Naruto said calmly. He looked past Valen, to Tomo's father. Meguridano. Your house is not defined by who you bow to. It's defined by the character of the people who bear its name. And your daughter has more character, more strength, and more honor in her little finger than this snake has in his entire body. She is the future of your house. Her loyalty is its greatest treasure. Are you really going to let this man convince you to throw it away? Tomo's father stared at Naruto, then at his daughter, who was looking at him with pleading eyes. He saw the truth in Naruto's words. He saw the shame in Valen's face. He saw the fierce, unyielding pride in his own daughter. A spark of his own forgotten honor rekindled. He stood up, his back straighter than it had been in years. Valendano. My daughter's contract with the Lady Sitri is a matter of honor. The House of Meguri does not break its word. This meeting is over. You and your offer are no longer welcome here. Valen was speechless. He had been outmaneuvered, not by power or threats, but by sincerity. He looked at Naruto's calm, unyielding face and saw a man he could not bully. He looked at the renewed determination in the eyes of Tomo's father and saw a man he could no longer manipulate. With a furious, sputtering curse, he turned and stormed out of the room. The silence that remained was filled with a profound sense of relief. Tomo looked at her father, tears streaming down her face, but this time, they were tears of gratitude. He pulled her into a hug. I am so sorry, Tomo, he whispered. I was a fool. I am proud of you. Naruto quietly stood up, paid for the table's uneaten dinner with a bill from his wallet, and slipped out, leaving the family to their reunion. Later that night, Tsubaki Shinra found Naruto on the roof of the student council building, staring up at the moon. The air was cool and crisp. That was a dangerous gamble, she said, coming to stand beside him. Her usual formal tone was gone, replaced by something more personal. If the Gladiolabla's house had taken that as a formal insult from the Sitri, it could have started a political feud. It wasn't the Sitri clan talking to them, Naruto said, not looking away from the sky. It was a friend sticking up for a friend. Sometimes the simplest answer is the right one. Tsubaki was silent for a moment. You place a lot of faith in people. It's all I've ever had. She watched him, the way the moonlight caught in his golden hair, the quiet strength in his profile. The man who could level a city block was also the man who could win a war with words, armed with nothing but conviction. He was a paradox, and she found herself increasingly drawn to the puzzle of him. I've been thinking about what you said, she admitted, her voice barely a whisper. About my mirror. You said I only reflect, that I don't initiate. That I'm a perfect shield, but a shield can't win a fight on its own. It was just an observation, Naruto said gently. It was the truth, she countered. My entire life, my entire purpose, has been to be Sona's perfect queen. To anticipate her needs, to reflect her will, to be the flawless shield that protects her. But watching you, you protect her by moving forward. By taking the initiative. I don't know how to do that. Her voice was laced with a frustration so deep it was almost painful. I feel inadequate. So, get better, Naruto said simply. She turned to him, her eyes flashing. How? You have power I can't even comprehend. I have my mirror, my wits, my training. It's not enough. Then spar with me, he challenged, finally turning to face her. Right now. Tsubaki was taken aback. Here. Now. What's the point? You could defeat me in a second. I'm not going to try and defeat you, he said, his eyes intense. I'm going to push you. Show me what you're frustrated about. Don't hold back. Don't be Sona's perfect queen. Don't be the council's vice president. Just be Tsubaki. And show me what happens when you stop just reflecting and start fighting for what you want. A fire she hadn't felt in years ignited in her chest. It was a challenge, an invitation, and a validation all in one. You'll regret this, she warned, a dangerous smile touching her lips for the first time. I doubt it, he grinned back. They moved to the center of the rooftop. There were no bows, no formal declarations. The spar began with Tsubaki blurring into motion, her rapier appearing in her hand as a shard of moonlight. She didn't attack. She created a dozen copies of herself, her mirror Alice ability at its peak. A good feint, Naruto commented, standing perfectly still. Now what? The real Tsubaki charged from his blind spot, her blade aimed not to kill, but to score a point on his chest. It was a perfect, textbook lunge. Naruto didn't move. He just let the blade come. At the last possible instant, he swayed his body just enough for the tip to slide past his chest, close enough to tear the fabric of his shirt. He grabbed her wrist, spun with her momentum, and used her own force to throw her off balance. She recovered with the grace of a cat, landing lightly on her feet. "You're not even trying," she accused, her frustration mounting. "I'm not the one you're fighting," he replied calmly. "You're still moving like you expect me to react a certain way. You're fighting a hypothetical opponent. Fight me." That broke her restraint. With a cry of pure, unadulterated frustration, she came at him again. This time, there was no finesse. It was a torrent of attacks, her blade a blur of silver light, her kicks and strikes woven seamlessly between thrusts. She was venting everything, her fear for Sona, her own perceived weakness, her confusion about him. Naruto met her head-on. He didn't use ninjutsu. He didn't use sage mode. He just used his body. He blocked her sword with his forearm, the impact ringing like steel on steel. He parried her kicks with his shins. He met her fury with a calm, unyielding defense. He wasn't dominating her, he was matching her, forcing her to push harder, to dig deeper. The spar went on for what felt like an hour. They were both breathing heavily, their bodies slick with sweat. Tsubaki's movements became ragged, her anger giving way to pure, dogged determination. She put everything she had into one final, desperate attack, a powerful, spinning kick aimed at his head. This time, Naruto caught it. He held her legs suspended in the air, their faces inches apart. They were both panting, chests heaving. Her eyes, usually so calm and controlled, were blazing with a wild, vibrant fire. In that moment of shared exhaustion and raw, unfiltered emotion, he saw the powerful, passionate woman behind the perfect shield. "See," he panted, a small smile on his face. "You can do it. You can initiate." He let go of her leg. She didn't fall. She just stood there, her body trembling with exhaustion and adrenaline. The fire in her eyes softened, replaced by a look of dawning understanding. A powerful, unspoken connection crackled in the space between them, forged in sweat and shared struggle. She started, but she didn't know what to say. Before the moment could be broken, the door to the roof opened. Sona stood there, holding 2 water bottles. She had clearly been watching for some time. Her expression was unreadable. "Your forms were sloppy," she said, her voice even. She walked over and handed one bottle to Tsubaki and the other to Naruto. "But your intent was clear." She looked at Tsubaki, and a rare, soft smile touched her lips. "I am glad you have someone who can push you, Tsubaki. Someone other than me." Then she turned to Naruto. Her gaze was direct, her violet eyes searching his. The political contract, the strategic alliance, the public betrothal, all of it felt like a distant memory. What was between them now was real. It had been built on a foundation of mutual respect, tested in battle, and solidified by his unwavering protection of her and her people. "Thank you, Naruto," she said, and for the first time, she used his given name without any formal honorific. The sound of it, in her crisp, clear voice, was surprisingly intimate. "For Tomo. And for Tsubaki." He just nodded, taking a long drink from the water bottle. "They're my comrades. It's what I do." Sona stepped closer to him, into his personal space. The scent of her, clean and fresh like rain, filled his senses. The city lights glittered far below them, a sea of distant stars. She looked up at him, her usual analytical gaze replaced with something softer, more vulnerable. My father called our betrothal a logical arrangement, she said softly. He was wrong. She rose up on her toes, her hand coming up to rest gently on his chest. And then, in the quiet solitude of the rooftop, under the pale light of the moon, Sona Sitri, the cool and logical king, leaned in and pressed her lips against his. It wasn't a passionate kiss. It was quiet, tentative, and filled with a profound, unspoken meaning. It was an admission. A promise. It was the sealing of their contract, not with ink or magic, but with a genuine, blossoming emotion that was far more binding. The king had finally, truly, chosen her partner. Chapter 6, The Sound of Silence. The peace was a fragile, stolen thing. For a few days after the rooftop kiss, a sense of normalcy, or what passed for it in their strange lives, settled over the student council. The bonds, now forged in combat and cemented by personal loyalty, were stronger than ever. Sona and Naruto's relationship had shifted from a political contract to a quiet, comfortable partnership. They didn't need grand pronouncements, a shared glance across the council room, a light touch of hands as they passed in the hall, it was enough. The rest of the council, led by a surprisingly warm Tsubaki, treated him not as an outsider, but as the unshakable center of their world. But the cold stone of dread remained. Naruto could still feel the memory of that void, that absolute nothingness. He had taken to spending his nights in deep sage mode meditation, trying to sense that unique anti-energy, to get a warning before it returned. He was meditating on the school roof, the Saturday morning sun just beginning to warm the tiles, when he felt it. It wasn't a spike of power. It wasn't a demonic signature or a holy aura. It was a dip. A sudden, localized drop in the background hum of the world's life force. It was like a sinkhole had opened in the fabric of reality, miles away but pulling everything toward it. Kurama's voice roared in his mind, a klaxon of alarm. Naruto! It's here. That feeling of emptiness from the lab, but 1,000 times stronger. Naruto's eyes snapped open. He shot to his feet, his gaze fixed on the center of Kuo town. He couldn't see anything yet, but he could feel it. A creeping, metaphysical cancer spreading outwards. His phone, a specially modified one from Sona, buzzed frantically. He answered it. Sona's voice was sharp, laced with an urgency he had never heard before. Naruto. Are you seeing this? Seeing what? I can feel it, he replied, already leaping from the roof and landing silently on the ground below, breaking into a dead run towards the town. Look at the sky, she ordered. He glanced up. The sky directly above the center of town was wrong. It wasn't cloudy. The brilliant blue was being replaced by a flat, lifeless gray. It was as if a celestial artist was methodically erasing the color from the world, painting over it with a primer of absolute neutrality. And then the sphere appeared. It started as a shimmer in the air above the main town square, a distortion like heat haze. Then it solidified. It was a sphere of perfect, shimmering black, but it wasn't dark. It didn't cast a shadow. It was a sphere of pure nullity, a hole in the universe. And it was expanding. Slowly, inexorably, it grew. As it passed over buildings, the lights inside flickered and died. Cars coasting into its radius sputtered to a halt, their engines dead. Cell phones went silent. The vibrant sounds of the city, the traffic, the chatter, the music, were being swallowed by an oppressive, ringing silence. Worse, Naruto felt it through his sage senses. As the sphere expanded, the life force of the plants, the animals, even the people within its radius, was being suppressed. They weren't dying. They were being muted. Put on standby. Sona, what's happening to the people? He asked, his voice grim as he raced through the now panicked outer streets. I don't know, she replied, the sound of frantic typing audible over the phone. My sensors are going haywire. All energy readings inside that zone are dropping to absolute zero. Demonic, holy, electric, it's all just gone. The Gremory Peerage is reporting the same thing. They tried to send Kiba in, his speed doesn't rely on magic, but the moment he crossed the border, he said he felt so weak he could barely stand. He had to retreat. The sphere had grown to encompass several city blocks now, a perfect dome of gray sky and utter silence. It was a quarantine zone of nothingness. This is a declaration, Naruto gritted out, his feet pounding the pavement. It's a challenge. A challenge to who? Sona asked. It's neutralizing everyone. Not everyone, Naruto said, his eyes glowing with the first hints of sage energy. It's a cage. And it's waiting for the one thing inside that isn't quiet. He arrived at the edge of the sphere. It was an invisible, perfectly defined line. On one side, the normal, chaotic world. On the other, a silent, gray, still life painting. He could see people inside, frozen in place. A woman reaching for her child, a shopkeeper midway through sweeping his stoop, a flock of pigeons suspended in the air as if they were cheap statues. They weren't dead, but their life force was suppressed to a level just above it. This was the power of the arbiters on full display. Not destruction. Erasure. Without hesitation, Naruto stepped across the line. The transition was jarring. It was like plunging into a vacuum. The sounds of the world vanished. The warmth of the sun on his skin disappeared, replaced by a profound, unnatural cold. The air itself felt thin, devoid of substance. For a normal devil or angel, whose very existence was tied to a flow of magical energy, this would be like a fish being thrown onto sand. They would be suffocated, rendered utterly powerless. But Naruto was different. His power didn't come from an external source. It came from the world itself, from nature, and from the roaring furnace of life that was Kurama, sealed within him. He was a self-contained generator. Here, in this zone of absolute silence, his golden aura of sage energy flared to life, a defiant bonfire in the heart of a frozen wasteland. He was the only thing moving. The only thing making a sound, the crunch of his boots on the pavement. The only thing that was alive. Come on out, he yelled, his voice sounding strangely loud in the oppressive quiet. You wanted my attention. You've got it. As if in answer, a figure descended from the flat gray sky. It wasn't a silhouette this time. It was a physical being. It was humanoid, clad in smooth, featureless armor that seemed to be forged from solidified nothingness. It wore a mask that was a perfect, polished mirror, reflecting Naruto's own determined, angry face back at him. It carried no weapons. Its power was its presence. This was an arbiter of silence. The designation formed in Naruto's mind, a piece of information given, not learned. The second censor. Its mission, also understood instinctively, was clear, to test the anomaly. To measure the volume of his shout against the perfect quiet of the void. The censor landed silently in the center of the town square, its feet making no sound on the cobblestones. It didn't speak with a voice. The words formed directly in Naruto's mind, cold and devoid of emotion, like a computer reading a text file. The anomaly designated Naruto Uzumaki. Your existence is a discordant note in the grand silence. You resonate too loudly across the strings of reality. This is a violation of Cosmic Statute 34.9. The cleansing is necessary. You can shove your statutes, Naruto snarled, falling into his fighting stance. You froze all these innocent people. Let them go. They are not harmed. They are paused. Their state is more peaceful than the chaotic cacophony of life. We offer a mercy you are too primitive to comprehend. Cease your resistance. Embrace the silence. I'll give you silence, Naruto growled. He charged. He was impossibly fast, a golden streak crossing the square in a blink. He threw a punch aimed directly at the censor's mirrored mask, his fist glowing with the power of his sage mode. The censor didn't move to block. It simply, issued a command. Be still. The words were not a request. They were a decree of reality. Naruto's body, moving at supersonic speed, seized up instantly. His fist stopped a centimeter from the mask, his muscles locked, frozen solid. He was still conscious, his mind still racing, but his body would not obey. He was trapped, a statue of golden fury. The censor tilted its head, observing him. Your physical vessel is resilient. The life force is potent. But it is still bound by the rules of cause and effect. My decrees are the cause. Your stillness is the effect. It raised a hand, its fingers outstretched, pointing at Naruto. Unravel. Naruto felt a horrifying sensation. The sage energy coating his body, the very stuff of his power, began to fray at the edges. It wasn't being dispelled. It was being unwritten, its fundamental properties being told to cease existing. Kit, fight it. Kurama roared, pouring his own immense chakra into Naruto's system. This thing isn't attacking you, it's editing you. Don't let it. Your energy is yours. Tell it to obey you. Naruto roared, a primal sound of pure defiance. He focused all his will, all his stubborn refusal to ever give up, into a single thought, I move. With a monumental effort that felt like he was tearing his own muscles from his bones, he broke the stasis. His fist, trembling, continued its path and slammed into the censor's mask. The impact was wrong. There was no satisfying crack of breaking glass or denting metal. It was like punching a hole in water. His fist went through the mask, into the nothingness beneath, and the censor's head simply reformed around it, completely undamaged. Naruto leapt back, breathing heavily, the effort of breaking the decree having taken a massive toll. He couldn't win with simple taijutsu. Okay, then, he panted. Let's try this. He formed a Rasengan in his palm, the familiar swirling sphere of power a comforting presence in this hostile void. He charged again, thrusting the Rasengan forward. The censor didn't even bother with a decree this time. As the Rasengan entered its immediate proximity, the technique simply dissolved. The spinning chakra unspooled into nothing, fizzling out of existence before it could even make contact. Your constructs are built upon flawed principles, the censor stated. They require a reality in which to exist. Here, there is only my reality. And in my reality, your power is null. It pointed a finger at Naruto. Erase. A beam of pure nothing shot from its fingertip. It wasn't black or white or any color. It was a beam of anti-existence. Naruto instinctively threw himself to the side. The beam missed him and struck a building behind him. The section of the brick wall it touched didn't explode or crumble. It just vanished. No dust, no debris. One moment it was there, the next it was a perfectly clean, spherical hole leading to the interior of the building. Naruto stared at the hole, a cold sweat breaking out on his brow. He couldn't block that. He couldn't deflect it. If it touched him, he would be gone. This thing wasn't a fighter. It was a walking deletion tool. Outside the null zone, Sona and her peerage, along with the newly arrived Gremory clan, watched in horror. They couldn't see the censor. From their perspective, they just saw Naruto, a lone golden figure in the silent gray world, dodging and weaving attacks from an invisible enemy. They had seen his Rasengan simply disappear into thin air. What is he fighting? Issei yelled, his hand glowing with the faint power of his boosted gear, which was struggling to even manifest near the border. I don't know, Ria said, her face pale, her usual confidence shaken. Whatever it is, it's operating on a level we can't even perceive. It's not just nullifying magic, it's nullifying physical attacks. Sona's hands were clenched into fists. He can't win. He can't touch it. Inside the sphere, Naruto was coming to the same conclusion. He was on the defensive, dodging the terrifying erasure beams, unable to land a single effective blow. His clones were just as useless, being unwritten the moment they were created. He was being worn down. It's the sage energy, Kit. Kurama yelled in his mind. That's the only thing it can't just switch off. It's life. It's the opposite of whatever that thing is. But you're just coating yourself in it. You're not using it as a weapon. How? Naruto thought, dodging another erasure beam that vaporized a car. It unravels every technique I try. Then stop using techniques. Don't try to make a Rasengan. Don't try to punch it. Your existence is an insult to it, right? So be more insulting. Be louder. Stop whispering and shout. Kurama's words hit him like a lightning bolt. He had been trying to fight the censor. But the censor wasn't a fighter. It was a concept. It was silence. You don't punch silence. You overwhelm it with noise. Naruto stopped dodging. He stood his ground in the center of the square, planting his feet. The censor paused, tilting its head, its erasure beam ceasing. Have you accepted the futility of resistance? No, Naruto said, a slow, dangerous grin spreading across his face. I've just figured out the rules of your game. He closed his eyes and took a deep breath. He didn't just draw on nature's energy. He opened the floodgates. He reached out, pulling in every scrap of life force he could touch, the energy of the ground beneath his feet, the air, the water in the pipes below, the faint, suppressed life of the frozen people and plants. He drew it all into himself. Then, he tapped into the deepest well of his power. The gift from the old sage of 6 paths. The power that was not just life, but creation. His body exploded with golden light. It was no longer just an aura. He became a miniature sun. The oppressive gray of the null zone was pushed back by a wave of brilliant, life-giving gold. The profound silence was broken by a rising, harmonic hum, the sound of life itself singing in defiance. He was no longer just a user of sage energy, he had become sage energy. A living, breathing incarnation of the world's life force. The censor took an involuntary step back, its mirrored mask flickering as if with static. Anomaly, intensity exceeding projected parameters. You wanted me to be quiet? Naruto said, his voice now echoing with the power of the world itself. Too bad. He didn't charge. He didn't form a jutsu. He just pushed his power outward. He didn't attack the censor's body. He attacked the field. The very concept of silence that the censor projected. He flooded the null energy zone with an overwhelming, unstoppable tide of pure life. It was a battle of concepts. Absence versus presence. Stillness versus life. Silence versus a song. The gray sky began to crack, fissures of brilliant gold spreading across it. The frozen people began to twitch, the color returning to their skin. The sound of the world began to bleed back in, a distant siren, the rustle of leaves. The censor let out a sound for the first time, a shriek of digital static and grinding metal. Its armor began to crack, not from a physical blow, but from the sheer pressure of the life energy overwhelming its null field. It was like a deep-sea fish being brought to the surface, its body unable to handle the change in pressure. System failure. Reality rejection, the censor shrieked in his mind. Naruto took a single step forward, the ground cracking under the force of his presence. He drew back his fist, which was now just a blazing orb of golden energy. This is for messing with my town. He punched. The blow landed square on the censor's chest. The result was an explosion of pure, white light. The life energy, having found a focal point of absolute void, reacted violently. The censor's mask shattered, revealing not a face, but a swirling vortex of blackness. The punch, so imbued with the concept of life, didn't just damage the arbiter. It cracked its very being. With a final, agonizing screech that echoed in the minds of everyone for miles, the second sensor's form destabilized and imploded, vanishing into nothing. But before it did, it left one final, chilling message burned directly into Naruto's consciousness, a message meant only for him. Data acquired. The anomaly is a primordial force of life. Standard cleansing protocols insufficient. Activating contingency. The first echo is coming. He comes for the loudest soul. The cleansing is inevitable. The null zone collapsed like a popped soap bubble. Color, sound, and life rushed back into the world. The people in the square unfroze, stumbling, confused, with no memory of the last few minutes. The cars started. The lights came on. The world was back to normal. But Naruto stood in the center of it all, panting, his six-path sage mode receding, leaving him drained and shaking. The physical battle was over. He had won. But he was left with the horrifying certainty that this was just a prelude. He had just defeated a scout. And now, he had gotten the attention of its master. Chapter 7, The Devil's Gambit. The sage's table. The world did not stay normal for long. The collapse of the null zone was not a quiet event. It released a pulse of dimensional energy and raw data that, while harmless to humans, screamed across every supernatural sensor grid on the planet. To the devils, angels, and fallen angels, it was the psychic equivalent of a nuclear bomb detonating in the heart of Japan. The official story, carefully crafted by Sona and disseminated through Sitri channels, was that the combined forces of the Sitri and Gremory peerages had repelled an unprecedented attack by a new sub-faction of the Chaos Brigade wielding reality-altering technology. It was a plausible lie, but it fooled no one who mattered. The leaders of the three factions were not fools. Their top analysts had parsed the energy signature. It wasn't technology. It wasn't magic. It was, as Sona had first described it, an anti-power. A force that could, for a time, switch off their very existence. And that was a threat on a scale they had not faced since the Great War. Panic, a rare and corrosive commodity in the halls of power, began to set in. The first summons came from Sirzex Lucifer. It wasn't a request. It was a command, delivered via a formal, blood-red teleportation circle that materialized in the center of the student council room. A high-ranking devil noble stepped out, his expression grim, and requested the immediate presence of Sona Sitri and Naruto Uzumaki at an emergency summit in Lilith, the capital city of the underworld. It seems your quiet approach is no longer an option, Sona remarked dryly to Naruto as they prepared to step into the circle. She had traded her school uniform for formal Sitri clan robes, a silken garment of deep blue and silver that bespoke authority. Naruto, dressed in the simple black suit he'd worn to Tomo's family meeting, just shrugged. Was bound to happen eventually. Can't hide a sun behind a curtain forever. The rest of the council watched them go, their faces a mixture of pride and apprehension. Momo had nervously handed Naruto a small bento box for the trip, while Tsubaki had given him a single, stern order: don't let those old fools push you around. The transition to the underworld was instantaneous. One moment they were in their quiet council room, the next they were standing in the center of a vast, intimidating chamber. The ceiling was a swirling vortex of crimson clouds, lit by unseen sources of light. The floor was polished obsidian, reflecting the grim faces of the assembled power brokers. They were in the main Devil Council chamber, the heart of their government. Seated at a massive, crescent-shaped table were the four great Satans: Sirzex Lucifer, with his calm demeanor and unfathomably powerful aura, the stern and militaristic Ajuka Beelzebub, the flamboyant and bored-looking Falbium Asmodeus, and Seraphol Leviathan, Sona's older sister, who gave them both a frantic, worried wave that was wildly out of place in the tense atmosphere. Lining the walls were the leaders of the great devil families, Lord Gremory, Lord Sitri, members of the Baal, Glaciolablas, and other houses of the 72 Pillars. Their faces were masks of stone, their eyes filled with suspicion and fear, all of them directed at one person, Naruto. But they weren't alone. On one side of the chamber, a golden portal shimmered, and from it stepped the Archangel Michael, his expression serene but troubled, flanked by his two strongest seraphs. On the other side, a tear in space crackled with black lightning, and Azazel emerged, flanked by a handful of his top Grigori cadres, including the Valkyrie Rosweiss. Even Odin, the All-Father of the Norse, was present via a projection rune, his single eye gazing at Naruto with intense, ancient curiosity. This wasn't a devil summit. This was a war council for the entire supernatural world. And Naruto was the guest of honor. The moment they arrived, the pressure in the room became immense. It wasn't magical, but political. The combined weight of a dozen hostile stares, each backed by armies and millennia of power. Lord Dantalion, a wizened, hawkish old devil from a deeply conservative house, was the first to speak, his voice a venomous rasp. Surzek-sama. You have summoned us here because of an existential threat. And yet, you have brought the source of that threat into our most sacred chamber. He pointed a trembling, accusatory finger at Naruto. This thing is what the enemy is after. Its very presence is what drew them to us. The solution is simple, we hand it over. We give the enemy what it wants and sue for peace. A murmur of agreement rippled through the old guard, the families who valued stability above all else. They saw Naruto not as a potential savior, but as a lightning rod for a storm they could not weather. Before Surzek could respond, Sona stepped forward, her voice ringing out with a clarity and coldness that cut through the chamber's heated atmosphere. A foolish and short-sighted proposal, Lord Dantalion. All eyes snapped to her. To speak so bluntly in this chamber was a shocking breach of protocol, especially for one so young. But her expression was one of absolute, unshakable confidence. You presume the enemy's motives are based on acquisition, she began, her mind working like a supercomputer, dismantling his argument piece by piece. All available data suggests otherwise. The enemy did not attempt to capture Naruto-sama. It attempted to erase him. The null field it generated was not a cage, it was a cleansing tool. It did not discriminate. It affected devil, angel, and human alike. Their goal is not conquest. It is extermination. They are not after Naruto-sama as a prize. They are after him as the first symptom of a disease they call life. Sacrificing him will not buy us peace. It will simply be our first casualty in a war of annihilation we will then be forced to fight without our single most effective weapon against them. Her logic was flawless, her delivery impeccable. The murmuring died down, replaced by a grudging, thoughtful silence. Lord Sitri, her father, watched her with a look of immense pride. She was no longer just his heir. She was a leader in her own right. The silence was broken by Azazel, who was casually leaning against a pillar, a smirk on his face. The little Sitri is right. And she calls him Naruto-sama now. Things must be getting serious. He winked at Naruto. You know, a simple, yes, to my beer offer could have given us a head start on all this. Michael, the archangel, spoke next, his voice calm and melodic, yet carrying an undeniable weight. Lady Sitri's analysis aligns with our own. This force, these arbiters of silence, as the message to the boy called them, represent a threat to all creation, not just one individual. Their philosophy is antithetical to our own existence, which is predicated on the light of our Father. We cannot stand by and allow the dark to consume the light. The debate was tipping, but the fear was still there. It was Surzek who finally brought it to a head. He looked directly at Naruto, his usually warm red eyes serious and searching. Uzumaki-san. You have been silent. You faced this censor. You received its final message. You understand this enemy better than any of us. We have spent the last hour debating strategy and theory. Now, we will listen. Tell us. What do you propose? Every eye in the chamber, from the mightiest Satan to the lowest-ranking guard, fell upon Naruto. The fate of their world was being placed in the hands of an outsider, a boy from another reality. Naruto had been quiet, not out of fear or intimidation, but because he was observing. He was watching the factions, gauging their fears, their strengths, their pride. He had seen this all before, in the tense councils of the 5 Kage. He knew what was needed. Not a plea. Not a debate. A decision. He stepped forward, moving to the center of the chamber, his posture relaxed but his presence undeniable. The political pressure that had been so suffocating moments before seemed to part around him, like water around a stone. "Your bickering is a waste of time," he began, his voice not loud, but carrying an authority that commanded attention. "You're all scared. Good. You should be. The enemy you're facing doesn't want your territory. It doesn't want your power. It wants you to not exist. It's an enemy you can't negotiate with, and one you can't hide from." He scanned the faces of the devil lords. "You," he said, pointing to Lord Dantalion, "want to sacrifice me to save yourselves. You're a fool. They'll come for you next. And you," his gaze swept over the others, "are trying to figure out how to turn this crisis to your advantage, how to climb a ladder that's about to be kicked out from under you." He then looked to Michael and Azazel. "And you too, your factions have been at each other's throats for millennia. You're worried about old grudges when a tidal wave is about to wipe the board clean. Your internal squabbles are exactly what an enemy like this would expect. A divided world is an easy one to erase." His words were blunt, disrespectful, and undeniably true. He had stripped away all their pretense and laid their deepest fears and failings bare. "The first echo is coming for me," Naruto continued, his voice dropping, drawing them in. "That makes me the tip of the spear. Whether I like it or not. I'll be the one to draw its attention. I'll be the vanguard." He paused, letting the weight of his words sink in. He was accepting the role they all secretly wanted to force upon him, but he was doing it on his own terms. "So here's my proposal," he said, his voice ringing with power and clarity. "Stop being devils, angels, and fallen. Stop being the Sitri, Gremory, and Grigori. Just for a little while. And start being an army." He looked at Surzex. "You have the numbers and the organization." He looked at Azazel. "You have the technology and the brightest minds." He looked at Michael. "You have the defensive and healing powers." And then his gaze swept over all of them. "And you have me. I'll be the one to face the first echo head-on. But I can't be everywhere at once. The arbiters will send their lesser soldiers, their censors, to pick you off while I'm busy. They'll exploit your divisions. Unless you don't have any." He took a deep breath. "I propose a new, unified front. A temporary alliance of all factions with a single goal, survival. We pool our resources, our intel, our strengths. We create mixed squads. We train together. We fight together. We stop this cleansing before it starts. Think of it as an allied shinobi force, but for this world." The audacity of the proposal was staggering. He wasn't asking for help. He was telling them how they were going to help each other, and placing himself at the absolute forefront of the risk. His clarity, his confidence, his utter refusal to be intimidated, and his willingness to sacrifice himself for a world that wasn't even his, it silenced all opposition. Lord Dantalion looked ashamed. Azazel was grinning from ear to ear, his eyes alight with excitement. Michael was nodding slowly, a look of profound respect on his face. Surzex Lucifer stood up, a slow, genuine smile spreading across his face. He had seen true leadership. A brilliant, pragmatic, and incredibly bold proposal, Naruto Uzumaki. He looked around the chamber. "I, for one, accept. The devil faction will commit its forces to this allied force. The Grigori are in," Azazel said without hesitation. "A chance to fight an enemy that breaks the rules of reality. You couldn't keep me away. Plus, the research opportunities are off the charts. Heaven will lend its strength to the defense of creation," Michael affirmed. It is our sacred duty. One by one, the other leaders, swayed by the Big Three and Naruto's sheer force of will, gave their assent. The political landscape of the world had been redrawn in the span of 5 minutes by a boy who held no official title beyond fiancé. Naruto had walked into the chamber as a defendant. He was leaving as the de facto supreme commander of their united armies. Later that evening, back in the student council room, the mood was electric. Sona had relayed the events of the summit. The council members were staring at Naruto with a new level of awe. He had faced down the most powerful beings in their world and had not just earned their respect, but their fealty. So, what now, Commander? Tomo asked, only half joking. Naruto looked around the room at the faces of his first and most loyal soldiers. Sona, Tsubaki, Momo, Rhea, Tomo, and the others. They weren't just a school club anymore. They were his command staff. He walked over to the large tactical map of Kuo that Sona often used and unrolled it on the main table. Now, he said, his voice filled with a new, heavy responsibility. We get to work. He looked at Sona. You're my chief strategist. I'll be the fist, but you'll be the brain. You'll coordinate with all the factions, manage troop movements, analyze the intel. You'll run this war from right here. Sona's eyes widened, then hardened with determination. She gave a single, sharp nod. I accept. He turned to Tsubaki. You're my field commander. You'll lead our primary strike team, the best of the best from all factions. Your ability to reflect attacks will be invaluable. Against the Arbiter's decrees. You'll be my right hand on the battlefield. Tsubaki's hand went to her mirror, a fire in her eyes. It will be my honor. He looked at Momo and Rhea. You too. You felt their energy. You understand it on an intuitive level. You're my R&D, work with Azazel. Figure out a way to detect them before they manifest. Create weapons, barriers, anything that can counter that null field. Momo and Rhea exchanged a look of disbelief and then fierce determination. We'll do it. He gave out more orders, assigning roles to everyone, from Tomo's high-speed reconnaissance to Saji's role as a liaison with the human practitioners they might need to recruit. He was transforming them from a student council into the heart of a new army. His army. They were no longer just the Sitri peerage, bound by a contract to their king. They were the inner circle of the one man who stood between their world and the silent, empty void. And they would not fail him. Chapter 8, The Unlikely Alliance. The agreement at the summit was a declaration of intent, but intent doesn't win wars. Trust does. The factions had agreed to an alliance in principle, but centuries of bad blood, suspicion, and arrogance were not so easily washed away. Surzex, Michael, and Azazel could command their core forces, but to truly unify their world, they needed the buy-in of the other, more independent pantheons. The Greeks, the Celts, the Norse, they were all powerful, proud, and deeply skeptical. Words spoken in a council chamber are wind, Sona stated, her finger tracing a line across a global map projected on the main table. We need firm commitments. We need to show them that this alliance is not a devil ploy for power, and that you are not just another weapon to be pointed. We need to demonstrate worth. So, we go on a trip, Naruto said, leaning over the map. His tone was casual, but his eyes were focused. He was no stranger to diplomatic missions that felt more like walking into a predator's den. Our first stop should be the Grigori, Sona advised, zooming in on a floating city hidden within a pocket dimension. Azazel is already an ally, but his people are scientists, researchers, and fallen warriors. They respect tangible proof and empirical data above all else. They need to see your power for themselves, to understand what they're working with. Naruto nodded. Makes sense. Let's give the mad scientist his data. The trip was not a grand procession. It was a small, targeted diplomatic team, Naruto, Sona, and Tsubaki. Sona for strategy and diplomacy, Tsubaki as their chief guard, and Naruto as the living, breathing centerpiece of their entire argument. They arrived in Azazel's personal workshop, a place of organized chaos. Holographic schematics flickered in the air, half-disassembled sacred gears lay on workbenches next to empty ramen cups, and the low hum of advanced technology filled the air. Azazel himself was tinkering with a gauntlet that sparked with black lightning, his 12 dark wings folded neatly behind him. Ah, the Wonder Kids arrive. Azazel greeted them with a wide, manic grin. Glad you could make it. I've already got a dozen theories about your sage energy. I think it's a form of primordial life force that predates the concepts of holy and demonic. It doesn't contradict them, it simply ignores them. Am I close? Something like that, Naruto replied, unimpressed by the scientific jargon. We're here for your commitment, Azazel. Not just you. Your entire organization. Azazel's grin didn't falter, but his eyes sharpened. My researchers are already working with your bishops, and they're ecstatic. But my warriors? My generals? They're a proud, cynical bunch. They saw you humble riser, and they were amused. They heard you face down an arbiter, and they're intrigued. But they won't follow a leader they haven't tested. They won't put their lives on the line for a power they don't respect. He set the gauntlet down and spread his arms wide. So, the deal is simple. I get the data I want, my people get the demonstration they need. You and me. A spar. No holding back. Let's see what the hero of the world can really do. Sona began to protest. A spar with the Governor-General of the Fallen Angels is an unnecessary risk, I accept. Naruto cut her off, his eyes locking with Azazel's. A silent challenge passed between the two. This wasn't about data. It was about dominance. It was the alpha of one pack sizing up the alpha of another. They held the spar in a vast, empty desert dimension that Grigori used for weapons testing. The sky was a searing white, and the ground was endless dunes of red sand. Sona and Tsubaki watched from a shielded observation platform alongside Azazel's top lieutenants, including a nervous-looking Shemhazai. Are you sure about this, Azazel? Shemhazai muttered. We still have no real metrics for the boy's upper limits. That's what makes it so exciting. Azazel cackled, unfurling his 12 magnificent wings. He hovered in the air, a spear of pure, golden light forming in his hand. Alright, Naruto-kun. Let's dance. The battle began with a flash of light. Azazel moved with blinding speed, a dark angel streaking across the sky, launching a volley of light spears that impacted the desert floor with explosive force. Naruto didn't fly. He ran. He flowed across the shifting sands, a blur of motion, the spears of light always seeming to miss him by inches. He was using his sage mode precognition not just to dodge, but to position himself, letting Azazel's attacks hurt him exactly where he wanted to go. You're fast on the ground, kid, but the sky is my domain. Azazel taunted, swooping down for a closer pass, his spear leveled. Is it? Naruto replied, his voice calm. He slammed his palm into the sand. Sage art, massive Rasengan barrage. The ground behind him erupted. Dozens of shadow clones burst from the sand, each one holding a fully formed Rasengan. With a unified roar, they hurled their attacks upwards. It wasn't a targeted attack, it was a blanket of spiraling destruction that filled the sky, cutting off all of Azazel's escape routes. Azazel's eyes widened. Clever. He spun, his wings creating a vortex of wind and light that deflected the main barrage, but he was still forced to weave and dodge, his flight path broken. In that moment of distraction, the real Naruto struck. He had used the clones as a smokescreen, leaping from the back of one to another, ascending into the sky with explosive force. He appeared above Azazel, his body cloaked in the golden shroud of his Karama chakra mode, a miniature sun against the white sky. My turn, he said. He formed a tailed beast bomb, a sphere of condensed, perfectly balanced positive and negative chakra that hummed with terrifying power. It wasn't the planet-destroying size he was capable of, but it was dense, controlled, and aimed directly at Azazel. Azazel felt the raw power contained in that sphere, and for the first time, the grin vanished from his face, replaced by a look of genuine shock and excitement. He brought his light spear up, pouring his own power into it, creating a shield of golden light. The tailed beast bomb collided with the shield. There was no sound. Just a blinding flash of white and black light that bleached all color from the dimension. The shockwave, a silent, concussive wave of pure energy, flattened every dune for miles in every direction, turning the desert into a perfectly smooth glass plain. On the observation deck, Sona and Tsubaki braced themselves as the shield around them flickered violently. Azazel's lieutenants stared, their mouths agape, at the sheer, world-altering scale of the power being unleashed. When the light faded, both combatants were still in the air. Azazel was breathing heavily, his light shield cracked and fading, his arms trembling from the strain. Naruto hovered opposite him, his chakra cloak burning steadily, completely unharmed. He had won. Azazel let out a long, shaky breath, and then his trademark manic grin returned, wider than ever. Ha, ha ha ha. Ha 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 ha. Incredible, he boomed. His voice filled with genuine delight. To not only match the power of a full-strength Governor-General but to overwhelm it, and you weren't even trying to kill me. He dispelled his spear and flew towards Naruto, offering a hand. Alright, you win. You've got my respect. And you've got the Grigori. Point us at the enemy, Commander. We'll build you an arsenal that will make the gods themselves tremble. The first alliance was cemented. Not with a treaty, but with a shared display of overwhelming power. Their next stop was Asgard. Getting a meeting with the Norse pantheon was a different challenge. They weren't scientists who could be convinced with data. They were warriors and mystics who valued strength, fate, and honor above all else. They responded to grand deeds and bold pronouncements. They were granted an audience in a lesser hall of Valhalla, a vast, smoky chamber filled with long tables and the ghosts of long-dead warriors. Odin, the All-Father, sat on a simple, carved throne, his single eye ancient and piercing. At his side stood Thor, the god of thunder, his expression a thundercloud of skepticism, Mjolnir held loosely in his hand. Vidar, the silent god of vengeance, stood in the shadows, his presence a heavy weight. The son of a different sky, Odin rumbled, his voice like the grinding of glaciers. You come to us with tales of a silent ending. The runes have spoken of such a thing. The Ginnungagap, the void that devours the songs of creation. We thought it a myth, a forgotten fear. It's real, Naruto stated simply. And it's coming. Thor stepped forward, his voice a booming challenge. And you believe yourself the one to stand against it? You, a mortal boy from a world of parlor tricks and flashy lights. We have faced frost giants and fire demons. We have stared into the maw of the Fenris wolf. What makes you worthy of leading an army of gods? It was the question Naruto had been expecting. The question of worth. Strength isn't about the monsters you've faced, Naruto replied, his gaze unwavering. It's about what you're willing to protect. But if you need a demonstration. He looked from Thor to the legendary hammer in his hand. That hammer. They say only the worthy can lift it, right? A murmur went through the assembled Aesir. Thor let out a short, contemptuous laugh. You wish to try and lift Mjolnir. Many have tried. All have failed. The enchantment is absolute. I don't want to lift it, Naruto said, a challenging glint in his eye. I want you to hit me with it. With everything you've got. The hall fell silent. Even Odin leaned forward on his throne, his single eye wide with interest. Thor was so taken aback he actually took a step backward. You want me to hit you? Thor repeated, as if he'd misheard. That's right. You think I'm just a mortal boy? You think my power is a parlor trick? Then prove it. strike me down. If I fall, you have your answer, and you can go back to waiting for Ragnarok. If I stand, you join my army. The sheer, insane confidence of the challenge was intoxicating. Thor looked at Odin, who gave a slow, deliberate nod. The All-Father wanted to see this. A wide, savage grin spread across Thor's face. Your funeral, boy. They moved to a vast, open training ground outside Valhalla. Naruto stood in the center, his feet planted firmly. He didn't enter sage mode. He didn't activate his chakra cloak. He just stood there, waiting. Thor began to swing Mjolnir, the hammer building up a terrifying momentum. The sky above darkened, and lightning, raw and primal, crackled down, striking the hammer and infusing it with divine, world-shattering power. This is the blow that slew the world serpent. Thor roared. Brace yourself. He unleashed the attack. It wasn't just a swing. Mjolnir flew from his hand, a bolt of pure, divine judgment, streaking towards Naruto with the force to shatter a continent. Just before the hammer struck, Naruto's body exploded in a torrent of fiery red chakra. A colossal, nine-tailed fox avatar, made of pure energy, materialized around him, its form so vast it dwarfed the halls of Valhalla. The Kurama avatar crossed its arms in front of its chest, a shield of raw-tailed beast power. Mjolnir, the unstoppable force, slammed into the immovable object. The impact was cataclysmic. There was no explosion, just a deafening, reality-bending boom that shook the foundations of Asgard. The ground for a mile around Naruto cracked and shattered. The very air seemed to warp and bend. The Aesir warriors watching were thrown from their feet. Thor was blasted backward, tumbling through the air. Odin himself had to brace his throne. When the dust settled, the scene was one of utter devastation. The training ground was a crater. And in the center of it, the colossal Kurama avatar stood, its arms still crossed. It was cracked, shimmering, and clearly damaged, but it had not broken. And Mjolnir. Mjolnir had stopped. It was embedded halfway into the avatar's crossed arms, its forward momentum completely, impossibly, halted. Naruto, safe inside the avatar's head, let out a breath. He had focused all of Kurama's power into that single defensive block. The avatar slowly unclenched its massive, chakra-laden fingers and caught the hammer. It held Mjolnir for a single, defiant second before tossing it back towards Thor, who caught it out of the air, his face a mask of pure, unadulterated shock. The Kurama avatar dissolved, leaving Naruto standing alone in the crater, his clothes torn but his body unharmed. He had done it. He had withstood a full power blow from the god of thunder. Silence. Then, Odin began to laugh. It was a deep, rumbling sound that shook the heavens. A laugh of pure, joyous approval. By my beard, he roared. Magnificent. Absolutely magnificent. Thor stared at Naruto, then at his hammer, then back at Naruto. His skepticism was gone, replaced by a warrior's profound respect for a strength that rivaled his own. You are no mortal boy, he breathed. The Norse had their proof. Not a proof of worthiness, but of raw, undeniable power. The kind of power that could face the end of the world and not flinch. During their travels, between the high-stakes demonstrations and political negotiations, the bonds between Naruto, Sona, and Tsubaki deepened into an unshakable unit. They were no longer just a leader and his lieutenants. They were a family. One night, camped under the strange, alien stars of a neutral dimension between pantheons, Tsubaki found Naruto staring into their campfire. You never seem tired of it, she said quietly, sitting beside him. The fighting. The pressure. I get tired, he admitted, poking the fire with a stick. But I don't get tired of having something to protect. For a long time, it was my village. My friends. The whole world. Now. He glanced at her, then at Sona, who was a short distance away, reviewing star charts and strategic notes. Now it's you guys. My council. My strange, little family in a world that isn't mine. It makes the fighting easy. Tsubaki was silent for a moment, absorbing his simple, profound declaration. In the flickering light of the fire, she saw not a god of war, but a man with a heart vast enough to adopt a whole new world as his own. You know, she said, a soft, genuine smile on her face, we're not just your family, Naruto. You're ours, too. In a quiet, comfortable gesture, she leaned her head against his shoulder, and they watched the fire together. While in Asgard's great library, searching for any text that might help their cause, Sona discovered it. An ancient, crumbling rune stone in a forgotten corner, covered in dust. It was from an age before Odin. The text was archaic, but she and a Norse loremaster were able to translate a fragment. It spoke of the Helgener, the silent ones, who came from the great emptiness. It didn't describe them as gods or monsters, but as cosmic law. They come to devour the songs of creation, she read aloud, her voice trembling slightly. To unmake the threads of the Norns. They are the echo of the void that came before, and the silence that will come after. The first echo. The name from the censor's final message wasn't a title. It was a prophecy. A name as old as the Norse gods themselves. Their enemy was not new. It was ancient, patient, and it was finally coming to collect. The end. Thank you for watching this video. Please be sure to subscribe to our channel and like this video.